capital that we were chatting yesterday. I'm going to hand it to Carter to start that conversation with us. If that's okay with you, Carter?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think would be helpful to talk about would be with regard to the spreadsheet that we handed out over the weekend as a reminder with regard to what it is that council should be considering for the fiscal year 19 capital plan. To remind you, the full capital plan is really this book right here. And I think we gave you a portion of it at least in your informational packets. And the spreadsheet that I'm referring to, if you don't mind my, looks like this. It has the colored cells and that kind of thing. It's actually a better resource than what you have in your budget book, because in your budget book, you've got some consolidation going on in there, and it doesn't break it out per cost center, if you will, throughout the 1% options that are available to you to consider for projects to be completed. So I would probably want to go, depart from that spreadsheet more so than even what you see in your budget book to get a more clear breakdown. We're going to try to pull it up on the screen here. Do we have handouts for that tonight? Or
I think Pete's getting them now.
he's getting them now, and we're going to try to pull it up on the screen here too, so we can. Do you have them?
That is not on the screen.
You don't. Oh, you don't have it available on the Z drive or whatever.
No.
Oh, okay. My mistake. My mistake. But if we could pull up the budget tool, Tom, so we can, if we need to, refer back to that, that'd be great. But there's a couple things I want to be sure that you're comfortable with regard to funding opportunities and considerations as we move forward, because I certainly saw last night an interest in delving a little further, in particular into Fund 30. Thank you, Pete. Does anybody need one of these right off the top?
I have trouble getting it.
Yeah, good luck.
I might need to borrow somebody's
Readers?
Yeah, thanks.
yeah, those readers, yeah. Exactly.
When you get old, you just carry them all the time.
Around the neck, right?
I'll just go under. I can make this bigger.
This one's kind of a
Let me see what I can
expanded
do.
version.
This must
Anyway,
be
does anybody else
secret.
need one?
I gotta have more powerful glasses.
Yeah, it's pretty small, man.
I'll
More
print a second
light.
copy.
You'll recall that the projects that are included on this sheet are really a boiled down version of this book into 1 and 2 priorities, priorities 1 and 2. And with that, we tried to find places to put them, again, consistent with the original charge that some of these things came together with, et cetera, et cetera. And so this certainly could be something that we could use to navigate us in this conversation. But furthermore, if there's discussion need with regard to why some of these projects are priority 1s or priority 2s, we're prepared to go into that kind of detail as well.
This is capital projects.
This would be capital for fiscal year 19 only.
Did there say anything in there about the police station?
The police station is covered in here, and it is covered under
Design and engineering.
It was $300,000, police station design and engineering.
Where is that?
And the one cent
under
for
1
it.
cent.
Well, I can tell you,
15?
it's right below the blue 500,000 for a police car,
1% 14. Thank you.
or
Okay.
fleet replacement.
Oh,
There
I
it
see
is.
it now.
Yeah, and it's an amount of
It's in blue,
$300,000.
I can't read it.
Well, that's because it's highlighted.
Yeah.
I'm a little embarrassed that I can't read it either.
The guy that
300,000 is
uses
what we're
a black marking pen to highlight things.
Try to clean up the glasses here.
I feel like I'm gonna need the owl magnifying glass to.
These are progressives.
What is $300,000 supposed to do for a police station?
That project, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
You bet.
That really gets us off and running with regard to design, with regard to potential, land acquisition if we need it. We're hoping that fiscal year, 1% 16 will supplement what we're setting apart here and help that project continue along the way. The other analysis that we might need to conclude as a part of 1%, 16 potentially passing is how far we think we could get with capital and whether or not we're going to need to seek supplemental funding in order to make that project happen within the next two or so years.
I mean, because a new police station has largely just been brought up by this body.
Right.
There's a vacant floor over there at the Hall of Justice. It's got an old jail in it that could be remodeled. I mean, if it's something that we feel is nice to do, well, it might have other priorities.
I can only say personally, I would like to see a whole new police station built.
At the expense of what? Because it all comes with a consequence. You're talking
We're gonna have to
30
ask the
million or
public for the
something.
money.
Huh?
We're gonna have to ask the public for the money. And I'm assuming it's a 2 to 4 year project,
I would say.
but it's gotta be done.
No, it doesn't. Actually, it doesn't have to be done. It's nice to have.
Well,
It's not an operational shutdown.
I hear what you're saying. It's just a difference of opinion.
Bigger one.
Mike?
You know, on the subject of a police station, and I don't know, and Chris, you can answer this a little bit. Steve, I'll put you a little bit on the spot here too.
Those bigger? This is a different one.
Is that a priority that the department sees? You know, I still live in the days when they were just so happy to get out of the basement of the 200 North Center and luxuriated in the new building. And I don't mean to, you know, and Steve, if you don't feel that's your place or able to comment on that, but, well, let me ask it this way. Has the police department done any kind of survey study or deep thought consideration about what they're
We, that's part of that, so there would be a needs assessment, and that would be what that money's for, is do an RFP and have someone come in and say, is it, do we move out of here, can we restructure or refurbish this building, or is it more bang for your buck to go outside of that and build something new?
Okay, because I know when they took the jail out of the 3rd floor of 200 North Center, that was a big project, and that was just basically a steel cage built inside of a shell. And the 3rd floor of the Hall of Justice is a lot different than that. But anyways, okay, thank you. I just.
Other comments?
Thank you, thank you. So you can see where some of the spreadsheet again gives you not only what the projects are, but where they would be funded through. And you'll notice that we are dipping into 1% 14 a little bit. We're dipping into 1% 13. Capital Projects Fund 30 is what drew some of your attention last night. In that is general fund money. That $6.7 million is all general fund, non-1% dollars. And so if you go down that list, that column, and it continues over to the next page, you will see that if the capital agenda as proposed passes your approval, then there will be $3.4 million left over in Fund 30 with regard to that cash balance available for your discretion, if you will, over and above what we propose for capital out of the fund.
I asked the mayor this, but I'm still not solid on how much money comes into us per year on the 1 cent money.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, for 1 cent 15, which is in the cycle that we're in right now, we assumed a total take of $55 million, which would be over a period of 4 years. So that would equate to 14 roughly per year.
Does the county get any of that money?
The county actually gets their own tranche of funding that would not count against what it is that the city gets on an annual basis. which again is about 14 million bucks a year.
So if we were to propose a 6-cent tax that was earmarked for school safety, which then became money that went to our law enforcement agencies, would the county get a piece of that for their sheriff's department?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, assuming an additional penny were passed, each municipality would also get funding in addition to the city of Casper and in addition to the county proper. So the answer is yes.
So if we were to pass something like that, we would be in pretty good shape to fund our, what I see as needing to probably maybe 15 to 20 new police officers, cars, what we would need to accommodate school safety and the safety of our community.
Indeed, we would anticipate with an additional penny, you could expect in kind of an average year, 12 to 14 million dollars, and to the city of Casper alone.
Well, the reason I bring this up is because I think that our city may be very acceptable to a 6 cent if it's earmarked for school safety and the protection of our young people. Because we need the money to beef up our police department, our sheriff's department, and all of our agencies that are protecting people in this county.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Councilman, the other opportunity that any municipality or county can consider in the state of Wyoming is portions of a 1% as well. So, for example, if we thought 12 to 14 million dollars might be too much to ask for a purpose that like you're identifying, we also have the option of considering a quarter penny and those kinds of things to hope, increase the chances of that potentially being supported by the voters.
Glad you told me that. Now, if we were gonna do something like that, the council decided they could back that, when would we have to do that to get it on the ballot and all that?
Mr. Mayor, Council, I'd probably have to do a little homework in terms of what that timing would require. But the reality is those kinds of votes can come up during a regular election year or voting year or whatever you want to say, or it can come up in an off year as well. So in a lot of ways, the county and the council can sort of direct how that goes. But I'd have to get a little more detail to more fully answer that question.
I think, Mr. Mayor, I think now might even be a little bit too late to get on, but certainly if you wanted to do that for this November, you'd have to be on the ground running right now, getting the commissioners and I forget if every city council has to agree to that or a majority of the municipalities. All of them
Say
tend to
two-thirds.
agree, I think, but
Well,
it's.
they all have children in them.
Hold on a
They
second.
all have schools.
Charlie and then Chris.
That is one of the big hurdles, is the state law requires it to be a countywide election. And one of the things your state association has been working on is to try to create some more flexibility with that process so that we can do optional taxes within our municipality alone.
Right.
And that's something we're lobbying for, because it's really something that the legislature could pass with no cost to the state. It just basically would give us the authority to go before the public and just say for Casper and Casper only, we would like to pass this tax. And then also to have some more flexibility with respect to the uses of the tax, because right now there are a lot of restrictions on that as well. And so there is some movement toward creating those options.
Chris and then Bob.
Well covered.
Bob.
Yeah, you're right, Charlie. Right now, we've got the next session coming up is a regular session. And so if Wham and us can work hard enough to get something done in that session, we probably got a better chance of getting it done next year than we would in a budget session. So it's
I believe it's part of one of the interim study group
Yeah.
topics, in addition to giving us some authority to levy taxes,
yeah.
which we
The whole
currently
thing
can't.
is wrapped up in some Wham recommendations now.
We need to sell it to our legislative body first. 'Cause they're our best people to carry it down there.
Next, tell us.
So, we've got a number of directions we can go this evening with regard to answering questions that you might have about capital, or considering, other uses for those dollars, if that pleases the council as well. One of the things that I would suggest, actually two of the things that I would suggest you consider this evening. One is, so far council has blessed an amount of $225,000 being forwarded to the health fund to help the health fund with some cash infusions and that kind of thing. Fund 30, in my estimation, would be an appropriate place to look to, given that it's not a reserve, it's effectively a residual cash balance that you have discretion to use as an additional supplement to the health fund. In that we're still quite a ways off with regard to the cash infusion that the health fund might need. I would add the caveat, however, that while we did demonstrate last night a $3 million infusion that would get the fund performing back to even, I'm not necessarily suggesting that at the beginning of the fiscal year that needs to be the allocation you need to make. I am hopeful that with an allocation to kind of get us moving in that direction would be something you'd support, and that the activity of the fund with regard to improved claims and those kinds of things, with any luck, would go the rest of the way. In any case, what I'd like to do with regard to the health fund is, again, get your blessing for an infusion, come back to you again here probably towards the end of the calendar year, if not sooner, to not only talk about where we think we need to go with the provision of medical care and support for our organization, but also give you a feel for where we're at from a performance standpoint with the fund itself, just like you would expect to see with your other enterprises that manage the utilities. So what I'm trying to say is I want to create the expectation and the pattern that you will be evaluating the health fund on a much more routine basis from a performance standpoint, just like you will be hopefully from now on with regard to the enterprises.
Got Chris and then I got Dallas.
I think the health fund needs to be corrected, and that needs to be a priority for us right now. And I think that it's important that we all recognize it's not any of the employees' faults that thing went in the tank. It just got overlooked. And if I'm hearing you right, there's $3.4 million unaccounted for in Fund 30.
That is, Mr. Mayor, not obligated to be spent in fiscal year 19. That's right. So that would be effectively the total that you would start fiscal year 20 with, in Fund 30.
Well, when I look down this list we've got on capital projects, there's things that obviously need attention, and my priorities would be existing buildings, I wouldn't build new stuff. I don't care how pretty it is or how it looked, until we balance 8 years of neglect. Nothing else gets added. We maintain what we have. And we have the position in the fire department that was just briefly mentioned, and the fire department has traditionally, they've not seen ups and downs and growth at all in their numbers. Not since I was sitting on the other side of this table, I don't think you even saw an increase, maybe one for the CRR unit, which was super effective. So, tell you what, I would like to figure out what we need to do to make that health fund stable, and then take it a step further and reduce, if we can cut that to a 5% increase to the employees by adjusting this funding, and I would like to see that inspector position filled. Those would be my priorities on cuts. So I don't know, maybe $100K for the fire inspector, and whatever number I just threw out there without any research on the health fund.
Dallas and then Charlie.
So what percentage of our employees are for the police department?
I didn't catch that.
What percentage of our employees work for the police department? Would you say?
15% from what I know.
Tracy, do you have that deal?
You got 102, what's our total of city employees?
500.
If it, let's just say it was 100 employees in the police department compared to a total of 500, just to make the.
And
20%?
77 in the fire
If
department?
you wanna look at authorized positions, I would say about 128 out of 492.
Okay, 128 out of 492. Okay.
So why I asked that question is because I wanted to know the percentage that would be involved in our health plan as well.
Mhm.
But I believe the police department is our institution for school safety. And I believe that if we were to propose a 6-cent tax, it has a high likelihood of passing, but the people have to know that the money is going for school safety. And I mentioned last night creating an entity for the police department that has a fund of money coming into it. It's similar to the way we've done CADA, which is somewhat protected from the imbalances in our economy. And I think that the public understands this. And therefore you would have that entity still under the manager and the council as it is, but in a different, perhaps corporation even, that would get this money, and that would relieve the burden on the overall fund for our insurance for our employees, because we would be funding it with a different money source that I think can happen here, because we're always looking for money, and this is the one area we can ask the public for these taxes with the law the way it is, I believe. If we have to wait for legislative changes, I just don't think we can wait anymore on this school protection issue. I think we have to really truly have about 20 new police officers hired. And I'm just searching for ways that the people that know more about money, I look at Tom over here, that could tell me how we could do this in terms of this funding. But the little pieces of the puzzle that seem to be coming to me are doing it similar to the way Cheyenne has done their water and their sewer and all of that, which how they have that brought that out of the direct city budget, which is truly what we've done on a miniature scale with CADA. They're out of our city budgeting. They get money whether we cut our employees or whatever it is. So that model, I want to transfer to the police department somehow, right now. It may have to be done with other entities, but right now the police department is the one that's under the gun for this school safety. We're the only ones with a police department, and the county's the only ones with the sheriff's department. So that's a huge piece of school safety. And I think our citizens will recognize that, and if you could relieve your budget with a little bit, even a half a cent, what would that do for us? Would that be a good thing?
Relieving the budget, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, of major portions of the general fund would be great, in that the general fund is the most vulnerable fund that you probably have.
We could give our employees their benefits back if this could happen. We could pay money into the insurance fund and get it whole, because I agree with Councilman Walsh. None of this is the employee's fault. It's not their fault that we've cut their wage, we've cut their bonuses or anything. I don't think there's anybody that would have ever even thought that they had any fault. They have no fault. If there's any fault, it's these 9 people right here. Not necessarily this particular 9 people, but going forward it is. And so I'm wanting to solve those problems, but I think, and I hear in my mind something that the former Governor Sullivan said not too long ago. He says, if we're going to keep Wyoming whole, and we're gonna keep young people here, we have to start having a conversation about taxes, cause none of us wanna raise taxes, and I don't wanna raise taxes. But this whole school safety issue, we can't let this happen in our community without us doing something. So that's kind of my superficial idea of where I'm going with all this stuff.
Charlie?
Well, two things. I mean, for the immediate future, we have to deal with this problem within the general fund. The problem with doing a tax with a specific purpose is you have to come back 4 years later and get it again. And if you have significant portions of your operations that are dependent on that, that's a precarious situation we don't want. With regard, and then the second matter is with regard to Fund 30, I just want to speak in favor of the Midwest Street reconstruction, which is the major ticket item in that group. And I don't know if that's what you were thinking about as far as building new stuff, Chris, but
It is.
that's a project that has been, we've been waiting 5-6 years for that. And that road has continued to deteriorate to the point where there are some safety concerns with, in my opinion, as far as how deteriorated it is. It's a joke in its current condition. And we can't put another layer of asphalt over it and have it be okay. It needs to be completely redone. And I just don't think there's a way to get out from that yet.
How much is that?
Can you phase it?
It's 2.2 million. It's a big ticket item, but we've been waiting a long time for this.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Walsh asked about whether or not that particular portion of the Midwest project could be phased. Mr. Beamer and I have been visiting about that project a little bit, and I think you can probably give a little more detail as to some of the issues we're trying to fix and whether or not it can be phased, et cetera, if it pleases the
Council, perhaps what you see in the budget book is a little bit of a misnomer. It already is kind of being phased. We're getting ready to bid out what I call phase 1 of this reconstruction project, which is between David and Elm. What you're really approving, or being asked to approve for this next fiscal year, is going from Elm to Spruce. It does not get you all the way from Elm to Poplar Street. So it is already being phased in 2 block increments. But each block is expensive. It's about just over $1 million a block. You know, that's putting power underground. So it's also upgrading water, sanitary sewer, storm water, all the curb and gutter, all the sidewalks, and all the other amenities that you see. So it already is, to a certain extent, being phased. So what is at 2.2 million does not get you all the way to Poplar Street. It goes from Elm to Spruce. And Councilman Powell is correct. We have been patching that section of roadway for 30+ years. We have patched all we can patch. We are to the point of where next thing we have to do is do at least a minimum, what I would call a scab, which is now, we have to mill off some surfacing and put on some new asphalt.
Okay, I've got Jesse and I've got Mike and Dallas.
Since we're talking about Midwest, do we own the streetlights?
You lose them.
Or just the power company, does the electricity company own streetlights?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, they would be ours,
Okay.
those improvements.
Because I know there are cell phone carriers that do partnerships with whoever owns the streetlights to put in towers. Might be a good source of revenue. The only safety concern that I would have with Midwest is the amount of foot traffic they have there at night and the lack of streetlights. It's people dodging between cars, trying to cross the road, everything. But that being said, what about taking maybe number 14 and 15, what's left over in those balances, and then paying half of that towards that 2.2 million? And then why would we need to, or why do we need to replace the event center box office for that 245? What is that actually needed? You know, can we postpone that? And then, you know, maybe that would give us close to 1.5 million extra in the number 30.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could, just to be clear, I assume, Councilman, you're talking about the,
There's
For
a
what
box
pers-
office compliance and a pull-down,
pull down gates.
summit pull-down gate.
The balance you were talking about though, in 1% 14, I think, is about 680,000, right? Is that the number you're
Yeah, funds
referencing?
remaining 1 million, and then the other one 680,000. Correct.
In 15, that's right, there'd be $1 million left over there, and in 14, 680, okay, I'm with you. To potentially fund a portion of Midwest.
Right.
If I could get Mr. Cortez to discuss the ticket booth and the pull-down gates.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, the box office upgrades are pretty much safety and security oriented. The current way that there's no bulletproof glass there, it's kind of embarrassing because I'm kind of talking about the big exposure that we have up there at the event center, which is we have cash that lays on shelves. We don't have any tills in there. We took Chief McFeeters up there for, it's kind of an orientation for the whole building, and he was, for lack of a better word, appalled with the lack of security we have in there. So you realize how much money passes through there on a daily basis, even though we do take that down to the safe on a regular basis. There are large amounts of cash sitting there, no protection for the employees. So that's kind of why it rose to kind of that level 1, level 2.
Okay.
As far as the gates go, I think someone else asked about that. But what those are is there's 2 gates on the the southeast corner, the southwest corner. They don't function anymore. They're the original gates that came with the building, I believe. And once again, safety and security thing. So what we do now is when we have to close off certain parts of the building, we have to put an usher there that sits there for the entire event once the public can come into the building. So it's kind of like we're paying somebody on a regular basis to monitor those 2 areas. And for the money, it'd be nice to have it one time, it's fixed, they get it done. I also like from the aspect of security from the standpoint that we can isolate certain parts of the building, whether we're talking about an intruder or someone with unsavory character, and also for fire and smoke, would be a nice feature as well.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Anything else, Jesse?
Just clarification, if we can use 14 and 15 towards at least half of that Midwest project, if that's possible or not.
Mr. Mayor, the other piece of information that I might add to that, Councilman, is the possibility that while that balance would be available, the resolution may not view that money as being available for streets, upgrades, or repairs. And so that governing resolution that determines how much money goes into each of those categorical capital kinds of possibilities, you might run into conflict there. But again, this group retains that authority to be able to make that determination accordingly. Yeah.
Mike?
Well, first, would it be, could we look into that resolution and see how that was, what accounts those amounts were put into, to see how much latitude we might have? Because that sounds to me like it might be, if there's money sitting there, why not figure out where's the best place and where we think's the best place to use it and spend it, and do that.
Do you mind if I ask Pete to kind of look into that, Tom, for us right now?
Too really hard to do. But the
Let me
other
check
thing that I'm wondering about this Midwest thing, and I know it might be way too late in the game to say this, but I'm sitting here thinking, why wasn't that an improvement district or something like that? Or if it's not too late to put that into that kind of a thing, because yeah, it would be really nice to have a nice new street, sidewalk, curb and gutter and all that in there, but I look at that area and then I look at other areas of town where, there have been improvement districts and things like that, and think, well, why do they get it paid for out of the general fund where some other outfit had to do an improvement district or an assessment and that kind of thing.
Dallas and Chris.
What I'm wondering is if we're doing what Chris suggested, and that is prioritizing these projects. I never get the feeling that we're actually prioritizing anything, because if we were doing that, I wouldn't give that Midwest Street a high priority right now. Or would I give the event center box office a high priority right now? So, because I can think of other places such as equalizing our employees as being a higher priority to me, my own personal opinion, than dealing with Midwest Street right now. Maybe when when they get the building built, that gets done, and of course we've got to we've got to look at that. But I've always truly, and it's just gentlemen today, I would really wish we would do a prioritization first without too much argument as to the seriousness of each project and how it affects people or whatever it does affect, so that we can all know where we should be spending our dollars first and maybe waiting on other things.
Chris?
So it looks like we're 225 short of what your recommendation was on the health fund. I would like to see that CFD position at I'm just guessing 100. We could knock down, offset what the employees are going to pay on a 10%. They're being penalized for our bad choices up to this point. If that could be done, it would be cool. $2 million would bring us up to the 120-day general fund. I would like to start working towards that. There's the event center improvements are nice to have. When I look at that street improvement, it's 2.2. The one right above it, miscellaneous arterials and collectors, is 2.4. So this is clearly not just a standard street upgrade. This is going to have all the street lights, something like that, correct? So, no, that's nice to have at this point. There's streets all over town that are in horrible condition, and that one is too. At that full level, I mean, I don't know. I would like to, does anybody else agree that we want to try and hit some of those things and to make our discussions go in that direction, or do nothing? I mean, I don't.
Well, that was the next thing I was going to say, is I think if we want to start putting down something to move forward, or we don't, and we just do what we've got, or Chris has, I think so far I've got Chris is putting down the only real suggestion Charlie put in, saying that we wanted Midwest. I know Dallas has suggested wanting to push for a 6 cent. Is that something? I have a suggestion from Chris for this. I don't know if anybody's.
Now, what's Chris's suggestion? I guess I'm not.
My suggestion would be, let's see where we can find 225 to balance out that 450 in the health fund that Carter said he recommended yesterday. I would like to try and find a way to fund that fire department inspector position.
You like a 5% raise, right?
What?
Did you want a 5% raise still?
5%.
Did you say a 5%?
5% deduction in the health.
In the health.
payment, yeah.
Sorry, my apologies.
Personally, yeah, I'll take a 5%. No, I would like to see what, and I don't know what that number is. What would it be? How can we fund that to knock down 5% and then make it very clear to everybody moving forward? Expect this to climb every year. It's at some level. It just hasn't been, so. And it would be nice if we could find $2 million to bring that general fund up to 4 months.
Yeah, well, I don't object to trying to get some into the insurance problem. I think that's a fair thing to do because we were part and parcel of that. And I think that's reasonable. But I think we should be cautious about changing the philosophical direction of 1 cent 15 or 1 cent 16. We have promised for the last 4 or 5 councils that we would spend that on capital projects given priorities that the people provide to us. And to arbitrarily change that with money that we think may be there at this point in time, I guess I feel much better with going in what we've already prioritized here for the last 3 or 4 years. These have moved up in the priorities from 5 to 1, generally. And it has been done, and when you read the whole book, they're all prioritized. And they have been moving up, and we're taking care of those as they can. We're doing ones and twos this time. And so I think it's fair to say that that's consistent with our philosophy in what we have done. So I just want to be cautious in changing where we're going with the 1 cent, because that's going to be for the voters in November.
Dallas and then Chris. What did you have a rebuttal to that?
Well, yeah, just a question. The ones I was looking at here that are the ones listed as capital reserve. And is that 1 cent money, or is that actual reserves? It's general fund reserve, basically.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that's the problem with the way that this is not broken out as clearly as it could be. This is probably a better indication of where exactly 1%.
Just represent all those.
Right, yeah, that's right. So when you look at the arterials and collectors that are being worked on or proposed to be worked on, that would actually be 1% money,
Okay.
purely. And Midwest is not being proposed for 1% at this point in time. Do you mind if I get Pete to clarify that information that was asked earlier?
Sure. Regarding 1% 15, as council may remember, originally the 1 cent 15 was expected to come in at $68 million over a 4-year period. That's back when times were a little bit better than they are now. We scaled that estimate back down to $55 million, and that included cutting a number of the categories that were originally set out in that original authorized resolution. The streets in particular was originally set outside as $22 million for that 4 period, and it cut down to 15.5 or 15.2, I believe. So, in regards to the question of can we spend a bit more money from streets money on Midwest, I believe there is still some room in there to do so without breaking that covenant of the maximum amount we promised to spend on streets.
Go ahead, Dallas.
You know, I do go down Midwest every now and then because I want to avoid the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit behind NC. The chief McPeters agrees it shouldn't be 20, it should be 30, but he never changed it apparently.
Might affect our budget, really.
Yeah, it could. It'd free police officers up to do more inviting things, though, I think, than running that over there. But do we really need to do the Midwest Street now, Mr. Manager? I mean,
Mr. Mayor, the one thing that I think needs to be brought into the conversation with respect to Midwest is not only is it in pretty deplorable condition, but the fact is that portion of Midwest is what we're going to have to dig into anyway with regard to dealing with the utilities to accommodate the state building project. And so that timing for that portion of Midwest doesn't come accidentally. It's been as a result of years of planning and working with the state to try to make sure that when they do have their vertical elements going up on that project, the underground elements are taken care of, and we're ready to move forward with regard to the things that need to be improved underground moving up.
and I would bet money, you do that now, you're gonna be digging that street up just as soon as that construction starts with that building, because, you know, the thing I always hate about change orders is gonna happen on that big building. So I'm not really fired up about doing anything with Midwest Street right now. I do wanna make a point though, Mayor, that you made something. I would like to find out if the rest of the council has any interest in having the staff pursue some thoughts on this possible 6 cent for school safety. I really think that the city might support that if we handle it right, but I'd like to see some movement on that, because I don't think school problems, I'm just afraid of the school problem.
We'll see what that is. Well, Mike, go ahead and you have a comment on that.
Well, as I don't want to say ultra long-term goal, but as a maybe a medium long-term goal, and by that, because I'm sitting here thinking, you know, if we were to do what Dallas is talking about, a 6 cent for school safety, you know, dressing up and walking around and call it school safety, you know, it's going to be next year, you know, first of the year before, at best, that it would come into effect. And then for budgeting, for hiring, and for all that stuff, you know, that might, I would agree that it's something that, long-term, you know, for a couple of years, you know, a year and a half, 2 years down the line, to maybe look at bringing that online. It's probably something that we should study and look at. But, you know, we have more immediate concerns here. And, you know, I think probably if, you know, Andrew, you know, if the city staff has sort of been planning this Midwest thing all along, maybe we shouldn't derail that. I'm with Dallas. I can just picture it now. It's gonna be beautiful and it's gonna be paved and everything, and then they're gonna tear it up and put in something new in there that somebody forgot or something like that. And I can't resist. On Collins, just today, I came from and I see Steve's over there shaking his head and smiling. It goes from 30 to 20 to 30 to 20 within less than 3 blocks. That is just silly. And there was a police officer dutifully sitting right there ready to go. And that is a cash register speed trap
for our
thing,
budget.
and something should be done about that. It should either be made 20 miles an hour all the way from Walnut through the downtown
30.
or something, you know, or 30. And I drive that street a lot, and I have never once seen a school child crossing Collins there. And I have driven that at 8 o'clock in the morning and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I have never witnessed congestion because of the kids coming or going from the school. To me, that is a ridiculous school zone there, solely for the purpose of making money on fun.
And I donated to it. I donated 29 and
I've never gotten a
20 and
ticket
got
there,
paid
but
200 some bucks.
anyway.
Chris and Jesse.
Wow.
But just to touch on what you were talking about on the additional resource officers. So what we did yesterday was bump them effectively to 6. And as far as trying to hurry through that additional one for this election, consider that, so when I took over the police department, it was down 10 from where it was supposed to be. It took me about 18 months to get to staffing, and then I overhired continuously to maintain that staffing level. So, well, what I'm saying is if we had it passed on this election, I don't think it's physically possible to get them in there. They're already down several, plus we just added some positions which will, you know, if I was the police chief, I would yell even louder than, oh God, now I'm down 14. But it takes a while to hire them. If you figure 1 year from the time you take the test until you're a solo officer, figure every phase of the police department testing, half of the candidates are knocked out of it. And so what you're left with is, if you have a huge candidate pool, and I mean huge is, you know, 40 to 50 when you start, you might get 4 or 5 at each academy class. There's 3 academy classes a year. So logistically, we've already bumped it up to where it's going to be stressed to fill it where it's at. And I think we could move forward on a public safety funding for the next election, but public safety and school safety has to encompass, it's not just the police. We used to have a real integrated operation with the fire department where they would actually, and this is for the incident, because you got prevention, mitigation, and then recovery, which you have to worry about on the 2 of them. Well, prevention is a difficult thing. Obviously, presence is one. But then if an incident occurs, you have to have an integration between your medical responders, your fire, and that's fire department, because they can handle fire and medical, and your police responders. But, so if we did a public safety thing, I would absolutely like the fire department to be included in that so that they can continue a combined effort on it. Because the police can go in and work a problem, but there's just a magic few minutes when you can save a life. And so that's a priority, but I think next year would be the best time to put that on there.
May I respond to what you
Yeah,
said?
you bet.
Here's my overall thinking, just generally, Bob. I just think that it's such a high priority that the time for studies and thinking is over with. we know it's a problem, we know we have to solve it. And to put that one off is to put potentially protecting children's lives off, which I consider to be a higher priority than Midwest Street or anything else we're doing. And I know these things take time. If the council would approve of the manager and staff looking into this, it just at least gets us started. You know, I always think if you're gonna move 1,000 miles, you still gotta take that first step. And I wanna take the first step.
I'm fine with looking into it, it was just.
Because, you
when
know,
might
and
it
I
be
know
able to
we
hit?
can't pass it by the week's end, I'd love to. But my other philosophy here is this: if you keep the guns out of the high school, nobody's gonna get shot. It's a simple philosophy. And that's all I'm looking at. I'm not looking at movie theaters. I'm not, you know, my church, there's a police officer up there on Sundays, and he comes in the back of the church and stands there and walks back and forth and directs traffic, and people love that. We're doing it at the church with 500 people. My point is we've got to somehow keep the evil gun. The only people that should have a gun in a school is the police officer. That's it, in my personal humble opinion. And to keep the guns out it has to be done, I believe, at least now, in the same way we've done our airports, on some level. And I think it can be done, and it will have an expense to it, but that 6 cents is more than pay for it, and probably we wouldn't have to have it through more than one cycle.
My only comment that I would make really quick is that that Santa Fe shooting, and I was just looking it up because I had read it. That Santa Fe shooting, they had an armed a school resource officer there, police officer. They had drills. They did it all. I mean, they were prepared. And I think that, and I agree with Chris, and I know where some of the other council members are, that I don't think we can arm ourselves out of it. I mean, we can't say, well, we could put 20 police officers in the schools. And I understand where you're coming from, but I think we have to look at it pragmatically in the approach that 10 people still died, and they had an armed school resource officer there, and a kid got in and did it. And I think we're faced with this, and I know where you're coming from, because I got kids in school there. I do youth work in schools. That's where my staff is. I see it, and and I worry about my kids all the time going to schools too. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, these guys were ready, and that's
an airport, Mr. Mayor. You can't get a gun on an airplane. Now, they don't have a bunch of police officers out at the airport. They have TSA agents that have metal detectors. You gotta walk through there. If there's a problem, they call the cop and he comes over. But the way you've explained that, what just happened, I agree. But what they didn't do was they didn't have it so that the shooter can't get into the school. They get screened before they get to the school. That doesn't take police officers to do that. That takes metal detectors, takes screening devices. You know, I had some weird idea. You could build a chain link fence around MCHS, and the point of entry would be gates in the front where they come through. Once they get on the campus, they've been screened. You don't have to have them at every door. They're doing this at Kelly Walsh. They built a big chain link fence around the back just for this kind of purpose, to keep people out of it. So it's a very simple proposition right now. We have a model for it. We don't have to sit around and study it. You keep the shooter from getting in there, from getting in that front door. And 10 cops running around isn't going to do that. You got to have somebody at the door screening people so they can't get the bomb in and they can't get the gun in. It's as simple as that, really. And that's what all these experts are saying, that's going to come to. The schools are going to be in a compound.
Okay, I got Jesse, Bob, Mike, and Charlie. Jesse.
I just wanted to see if we can get some traction on getting 1 cent, 14 or 15 excess into some of the capital projects that we want to use general fund money for. I don't see putting $2.2 million towards a capital improvement project is changing a resolution that's binding this current council, and we're using it for capital improvements. I don't see how that is changing anything, and then I'd be curious to meet the bean counter, and that's the regular citizen that's watching these dollars that knows the resolution, because maybe we should brought them on as staff. I'd like to know who's monitoring that. But to be serious, I don't think it's outside of what we're saying we're using tax dollars for to improve a project such as Midwest. From there, we can use that money, plug it into that $450,000 that you're asking for, and then hopefully have some additional money left over too.
So you're good with the 2.2 for Midwest, is what you're saying?
Well, I am, but I'd like to subsidize that with the number 15,
Oh, okay.
1 cent, not from our general fund, or Fund 30.
Mr. Mayor, can I make an announcement?
Yes.
We have heard council loud and clear, and this summer, we're going to remove that 20-mile-an-hour speed zone from that'd be the north side of NC. Consider it done. Thank you very much.
That's a great move, and we're gonna do it by
Dallas,
summer.
when I go
That's
by
great.
there, I'll lend them a tow chain to pull.
It has action.
I've talked to the guy who sets those speed zones in the Times. He just has to switch one on.
Got Bob, Mike, Charlie, and Chris.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thumbs on that?
Oh, do you want to?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just to move it forward?
You want
Is
to
that
restate
possible?
that for everybody again?
Yeah, sure. So I'd like to use 1 cent number 15 of what's remaining to subsidize that capital improvement project of Midwest Avenue. And then take the money that we'd be saving from there, from Fund 30, and then put that into the healthcare fund and have the rest in that Fund 30, whatever's left over.
Does Jesse have any support for that?
And the fire inspector?
We could use it at city manager's discretion, but put more money into, I guess, that Fund 30 reserve, which essentially general
If
fund.
you wanna go ahead.
Can I just follow along?
You still wanna go ahead and do this?
Jesse's going down the same road that I would like to see. Is there something collectively that we could say that we want and devise a number and then start working towards that number overall so that it would be, we shift that money over, we've got this much extra. I mean, collectively, can we pick what those primary areas we would like to fund are and what that would be, and then tailor exactly what Jesse's talking about on adjusting some of this money to hit that, or?
I'm not following how his proposal, what it does for the general fund and what it does for the things that you wanted to fund, such as the insurance and stuff.
Releases is 2.2.
Yeah, so 2.2 would be 12% money instead of general
Were you
fund.
thinking of 14.2, Jesse?
Yeah.
600,000.
I mean, if we could use all of it, I think that's great, and then we could wipe out everything that we're trying to, or not everything, but
And it sounds like
half of Fund 30 items.
Okay.
So that would be
Whenever you get a chance.
1.6?
Go
that
Go
you're
ahead,
looking at?
whenever you get a chance, I'll talk.
Okay. Sorry.
Bob, you want to go?
Thank you.
Hold on 1 sec, Jesse. We're going to come back to that. I'm gonna have,
I just wanted to clarify.
go ahead, Bob. And we're going to get through this part, and then we're going to have to make some choices here, guys.
Yeah,
okay?
I guess again, I want to caution you guys, what's traditionally happened on funding that was unallocated from 1 cent funds, we waited until the cash was in. And then we made allocations with that. We reallocated that money to projects as we figured they came forward with priorities. So I don't know that we want to be messing with something that we might figure is going to be left. And we still have the option then to fix the insurance pile. It doesn't have to be done today. And we already agreed yesterday that we were gonna study this and we were gonna hear back from the manager on how this insurance thing was going. That's what we talked about yesterday. So I just hesitate to change horses in the middle of the stream. I would just as soon approve what we've got here, and then 6 or 8 months or a year from now, we're gonna know exactly where we are on 1 cent 15 total income. And I haven't, my personal suspicion is it's gonna be a little better than what we've anticipated.
So let me ask you guys this. Do we want to stay, Bob is suggesting we stay put. Maybe we start there. If there's interest for that, then we maybe don't have to. Do we stay put where we're at? Is there any support for Bob suggesting that, I guess?
I have a question first. I would like the manager to weigh in on Jesse's idea, if he cares to.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. And if I understand the proposal correctly, let me just be sure I get it. I think what you're suggesting is using the balance in 15, which would at this point be 1.08 million, and 14, which would be 680,000.
Right?
The combined value of that would be 1.7 million, roughly. We would deduct that basically off of the 2.2 million obligation or expectation, if you will, for the cost of that project.
Right.
And then the savings that we would incur in Fund 30 with that infusion, if you will, we could dedicate to the health fund. Is that right?
Health fund or fire department or reserves.
Okay,
You know.
gotcha. I think it's a great idea. I think it could help the Fund 30 issue, and it would provide some relief to the general fund and the health fund. I do, I think it's good.
I remember a year ago when we were having these meetings,
Mhm.
and I was questioning Pete about money shuffling, and that's what we're doing. A little money shuffling, but I like this. I like this money shuffling.
And just follow up, you're not concerned about Bob's comment that the money isn't all in yet?
Well, the money,
14 is
14 is done and
14 is
closed.
done.
Yeah, that's right. 15, we could actually do better than the 1.08 in terms of the balance that would be residual. 1.08 is what we are very comfortable it might happen. And I do think we have room in the street maintenance areas to accommodate this to a very close degree. There may be some imbalances there, but the long and short is I don't think you'd find yourselves upside down with the resolution and still be able to help Fund 30, which indirectly helps the general fund issues.
So I see some hands up. I still have Mike, Charlie, and Chris on, but are your comments directly about Jesse's proposal? Okay, go ahead, Mike.
I understand and appreciate Bob's concern there. You know, we're trying to establish a budget here, and yeah, all of this is all a little bit of hocus pocus crystal ball gazing, because we don't know how much tax is going to come in anywhere. Obviously, you know, the figures on the 1%, 15, or you know, the most recent one, we won't know how much is going to come in on that until the end of the year. And if that comes in high, great. If it comes in low, well, we're going to have to go back and readjust somewhere along the line anyway. Just the same thing as with if, you know, we get into 2019 and revenues are way down, we're gonna have to come back and do that. So I kinda like Jesse's idea to do that, and I have a great deal of respect, Bob, for what you're worrying about. But unless I'm missing something, I don't see that concern as being anything much different than the concern that we have to, you know, are our revenues gonna equal the budget anyway?
Charlie.
Well, and if we do come up short, that just means less into the reserves. So, you and I are just gonna disagree on this school safety issue. Not in terms of its importance, but in my opinion, we have a duly elected school board, and it's their responsibility to run the schools and make decisions about how to make them safe. I support the school resource officers because the school board came to us and said, would you be willing to split the cost of 2 positions? I'm good with that. But when it comes to metal detectors and other things, I don't think we have any business meddling with their decision making. And if they want us to help with things of that nature, and they have already launched a very serious initiative to look at school safety on their own, I'm all about that. I just want to work in coordinated fashion with the schools. And I know that the school district administration has been studying school safety, and they have been looking at all the models that work and don't work. And I think we should be, as I've said before, taking our cue from the content experts, the people who understand these things. And if they come to us and say, would you guys be willing to help us with this or this or this, then we have a serious discussion about that. But us trying to tell them they should do metal detectors, or they should do this, or they should do that, I think we're overstepping our bounds.
like to respond to them. I have a letter I wrote to them that I sent out yesterday, but I don't think they got it by the time
That's
we,
what Charlie just said.
and I could get the letter very quickly and bring it in because it's out in my vehicle, but what it says is, if they should decide to use metal detectors, I'm not telling them to do anything here. My letter was, if you should decide to use metal detectors, I would personally buy the two of them, one to go to NC and one to go to Kelly Walsh, but it'd be up to them where they want to put them.
Fair enough.
And I put a price on them, and that wasn't telling them to do anything, that was offering to help them should they make that decision.
Okay.
And I remained that way, and I'm sorry I didn't get that more adequately explained, but I'm gonna go for just a second and get the letter so you can read it and see it for yourself. But I agree with what you just said, but I also agree, we are the ones who have the police department, and by statute, we regulate the police department through the manager. And that police department is integral in school safety, and we have to have it properly funded. We have to have the number of officers these gentlemen need that are properly trained, and we have to have resource officers. But my theory for all of this is, you gotta keep the evil gun out of the school. And now how do you do it? And the only thing I know, because it's work, is airport security. So I'm gonna run out and get the letter and bring it back.
If I, because I just like to real quick, you know, I agree with everything that Charlie said. I wish Alice was still here. You know, my main reason for supporting the idea of school resource officers is not that they're gonna be security guards, not that they're gonna be anything. You know, I would even go so far as to say that they should be unarmed, except for that I believe that, you know, the duty belt and being armed, that's part of a policeman's uniform in essence. But in terms of that, you know, having an armed guard in a school is gonna stop something, I don't think that's gonna stop something. The big value that I will tell you to security, to police officers in school is the interaction and the potential interaction that the police officers can have with the kids. It's just like the value of having police officers in drug courts. You know, if we're talking about young people who have never in their life had a positive interaction with a police officer, this is an opportunity to change that. I want to see those police officers walking up and down the hall, talking to these kids, saying hello to them, joking with them, you know, helping them out with little problems, things like that, interacting with them. Then the function and establishing friendships and relationships with them, that's going to do more. And, you know, and have those officers trained so that they're looking to see if there's a kid that, you know, that's wearing galoshes in the summertime, or, you know, something that stands out. Have those guys, you know, that's the value that I see to them. And the security guard aspect is just purely incidental. And I would really urge that all of us need to keep that objective in mind, that that's the value of having these cops in there, is interacting with these kids and establishing good relationships and showing them that, you know, we're not just the mean old guys that are out there with handcuffs and gonna drag you in. But anyway, thank you for.
Chris and then Sean.
All right. I'm more passionate about this probably than anybody at the table. I'm not talking about it right now because we have taken a substantial step by funding 4 SROs to go there. I would like to stick to the task at hand that we have to solve this moment. And if we can't do that, we're on effect. We need to move forward. Jesse's got a question, or he's got a proposal. I would like to move forward on that.
Agreed.
That's what I was just trying to say. Can we get back on his point?
Yep.
I mean, we got 13 empty police officer positions to fill, and how you gonna find an extra 2 or 4 school resource officers? Good luck. But he's got a question that we should answer.
So, do you have a support for Jesse's proposal?
Can I follow it up?
Yes, you can. Go ahead.
All right, so Jesse came forward with a proposal, and I was doing the math. If we right-size the health fund with $225, puts us at the 450 that you were talking about last night. If we fund fire department, inspector, I'm guessing 100 with benefits and startup, I don't know. That's 350, that leaves us 150. What does $150,000 do to reduce the employee's contribution to healthcare? So I guess that's my proposal. I would like it to go 225 to the health fund, fire department position, and 150 to defer employee cost on health insurance.
Just zeroing out 14.
Roughly, yeah. So my rough numbers are on my phone.
Okay. Did you include money for this 120-day?
I did not, because we didn't have enough. So we went
Do we now? Don't we now?
in different places, I think we do.
With what he's projecting?
No, I just used up everything he projected.
We're leaving 15 excess alone, just, or unallocated alone, you're just using 14.
I'm talking
There's
about
not enough
what?
in 14.
It's 14 and 15.
Yeah, that's 1.6.
Yeah, the savings of the money that Jesse proposed putting into that road project. 325 roughly is what it takes for fire department position, 225 for health fund, leaving us around 150, and I'll bet you Pete will correct me, I can use the calculator in a second. And using that overage to defer costs on employee health, and I think that consumes most of that.
Sean?
Are we including any type of COLA or step increase in any of these proposals?
From yesterday, we did, yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
still?
That
That
funded?
yesterday
That's
still
the 2%,
stands,
yeah.
Just wanna
this
make
is
sure.
in addition.
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought that the proposal Jesse put forward, Councilman Morgan put forward, was actually for a total infusion of $1.7 million. Because I thought it included 15 and 14.
Right,
Is that
so
right?
then $432,000 is what we would use out of our Fund 30 to fund the Midwest project.
How much? I'm sorry.
$432,000 would come out of the Fund 30. So we basically are just moving
Oh, the
all of that
difference,
money
yeah.
over into Fund 30.
Does that make sense?
So the 1.7 that comes forward from both 15 and 14
Go to the
would-
Midwest.
would relieve Fund 30 of about $1.7 million.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And so the proposal that Councilman Walsh is adding to, I suppose, would not exhaust the 1.7,
Right.
but would direct funding into the places that you identified. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Charlie and then Dallas.
So we're really just spending the 0.7.
Correct.
So if we're looking at that large leftover amount, that is the 1 cent 15 unallocated, and putting that into reserves.
We're not doing that. We're funding a capital improvement project that is a priority 2 for Midwest Avenue. So we're using the 1 cent funds as deemed sacred ground by survey to fund a priority 2 capital improvement project known as Midwest Avenue.
Right, and so I think we're saying the same thing. So we basically take that 2.2 and we bring it down to 0.5. So but in terms of what happens with that 1.7, Chris's proposal just spends the 0.7.
He's going to use leftover money since we're not allocating that from the Fund 30. So now that just gave us more money in Fund 30 that we were going to use for the Midwest.
Right. But the total amount, I believe, of the fixing the health infusion and the fire inspector is really just adding up to the amount in the overage in 1 cent 14.
You know, I don't think we're saving anything with my proposal. We're reallocating and sending it.
Right. I think we're all saying the same thing, but in terms of the math, for me, is we still have the 1 cent 15
Right.
that is not touched by that proposal.
Exactly, and I think maybe we might want to take a little bit to right-size our general fund.
We can.
Not all
but-
at once, but
But if we're really concerned about all the things, and Sean, you know, your comments about retention and the importance
Yes.
of valuing our staff, maybe we should, in addition to the 2% COLA and knocking the health insurance contribution down to 5%,
maybe we should add a small bonus.
Are step increases included?
Yes.
Yeah, I think 225 is definitely.
225 was set to fund the line item on that. Well, can we vote on mine? and
Yes,
then
let's vote on-
Keep stepping them up?
Unless you have a comment directed towards.
Yeah, I just have a comment on that. So we're increasing it by 10% for the health care on city employees. So we have a 10% cost increase and the employees have a 10% cost increase. Last year we had a 14% cost increase and we passed 0 of that on to employees.
Right,
So
but that's
we're
not
still
their
paying it.
fault. It wasn't like a collective vote with what the employees were gonna do.
Right.
Given the opportunity, I'll bet they would've said, I wish you would've given me a 1% every year
Right.
instead of hitting me with this. And so, yeah, I am saying take that 150,000 and offset their contribution a
But
little bit.
historically, if you look at the 4% increases, 7%, every time that we had a cost increase that we incurred on ourselves, we passed that along year over year. I understand 14% is a big jump. I
And
don't
it
know where.
stopped in 2011. And
Right.
so I just don't think we need to throw that all at them right now.
It's just, we are incurring 24% on a cost increase on ourselves, and we're saying they're only going to cover 5%. And we
I don't
have
know that
24%.
I don't know if it'll cut it down to 5%. Do you? It'll just reduce it. I don't know.
Okay.
That, I don't know what that number does to affect it percentage-wise on that 10%.
So,
I have a question.
okay, go ahead, Dallas.
I'm still trying to figure out if we, with this whole issue, I like the whole issue, I like everything everybody's saying. What is it, what is the, where are we with the resolution that was passed at one point, where we want the 120-day funding in our savings? I'm not saying that very eloquently, but you know what I mean.
I do. Mr. Mayor, Councilman, right now, you're at 102 days, which is roughly $12.5 million. And so in order to get to 120 days, you would probably need to infuse another $2 million
2 million.
to get you to 14.5.
Can that be done with what we're doing?
Next up, we can.
At this point, we would certainly get closer if indeed the proposal were to include the balance of what we just saved in Fund 30 being infused, but it wouldn't quite save the day.
If we get a balanced budget, we get the 120, and we prioritize these projects, I think we can say we've done a pretty darn good job.
I would agree.
So Carter, or Chris, to make you have to do this, can you repeat so everybody knows your proposal?
Okay, I would like to take of the money that was relieved with Jesse's recommendation. 225 goes to the health fund. Fire department gets their inspector. That number, whatever that actually is, of that chunk, I don't know if it's 150 or maybe a little less than 150, goes to offset the employee's contribution on health. And then I think after that vote, we talk about how we can start to gradually climb to that 120 days with this other funding. But that's a different.
Okay, so,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No, you're fine.
Unless the math doesn't work, so tell me
Oh,
that.
no, it would work, yeah. So the 225 would be a cash infusion, the 150 would be used to offset what we ask from the employees,
Yes.
correct? Okay, I'm with you. And then you said one more thing,
The fire department inspector.
fire department inspector, okay, all right.
That doesn't include his idea of a bonus, though.
No.
Not yet, right.
So everybody heard Chris's proposal. Is there support for that? Yep.
You got the thumb. Not the thumb.
Okay, anything else?
May I ask a
You
question? Can we ask Mr. Beamer if this makes the Midwest project any more difficult to do it this way?
Your Honor, Counsel, I really don't care where the money comes from. If the
Good
money's
answer.
there, we will get the project done.
And while we have you on the floor, have you been, since there's concerns about tearing up a brand new road, have you been in communication with the state? Do you have any concerns about that possibility that we would rebuild that street and then 6 months later have to tear it up to put a sewer line in?
I do not share that concern that Councilman Laird has voiced with change orders. They may well have change orders, but it will be within their site. We will plug in what size utilities they need for that facility. That type of engineering is relatively easy to do, so we will not make that mistake. So we will know what size water main they need, what size sewer main they need, and what size storm sewer they need to get their drainage out. That stuff is relatively easy. When you start digging underground and you don't know what's there, that's when you start running into
On their side of the
on
project.
their side of
Yeah.
the project, on
Yeah.
their side of the fence. But that would be their issue and not the city's issue.
I realize what you're saying, but I've been in lawsuits over this kind of thing, where everybody thought it was all great, and all of a sudden they're out there backholing the streets down. I'm just saying it's a
That's why
possibility.
I was asked what my opinion was.
I know.
And I don't
I'm not
share that
challenging,
concern.
I'm not challenging your opinion either.
Start placing shocks.
Anything else that we want to try
You're on
to
about money.
try to address before we move on to the next item? Chris.
Yeah, well, we're 2 million off of our 120 days. And we have 3.4 million. And the beauty of it is, we have 3.4 million in Fund 30. And, if we went at half of our problem, we leave 2.4 million in Fund 30. We add $1 million to the 120-day thing, and we just work on increasing that. And if worse comes to worse, we pull the $1 million out of the general fund. We're not spending it, so we're putting it from one account into a savings account is all. So I would propose taking $1 million from Fund 30, which is at 3.4, applying it to the reserve account to help get us closer to the 120-day we need.
Support. Oh, Bob.
Yeah, it won't hurt to wait 60 days to do this or 120 days, because the money that's overspent on insurance right now, it's not like we're losing interest on it. And so I would just say that let's hang fire a bit and see what happens a few months from now. It doesn't have to be fixed right now.
Any other comments, Charlie?
Well, I don't know if this is on topic or not, but if we do have $1 million in the 1 cent 15 fund that is not really touched by Chris's proposal, if I'm doing the math correctly, and the Midwest project offers us an opportunity to take something out of Fund 30 and fund it with unallocated 1 cent 15 within the bounds of the resolution, then I do think it gives us an opportunity to maybe do a little more for our employees. Whether that be a 3% COLA, or a bonus, or some other mechanism, because they have been shorted for a long time.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, the advantage that we gain by using Fund 30 to do something of that nature is that it would be a one-time infusion into the investment into the employees, and it wouldn't be an ongoing requirement budget year after budget year after budget year unless you decided to do that every single year.
If we made a COLA.
Unlike a COLA, right, exactly.
But a bonus
Right.
is just a one-time.
You're talking in addition to the COLA that we've got
Yes.
now.
Giving them a bonus.
What are you thinking?
Well, last time around, we did $1,000 per staff.
So we're looking
So that'd be
roughly
that'd be
$500,000?
$500,000, and it would eat up half of that.
Could I change mine? Should I say 500,000 to the general fund and 500,000 to a bonus?
To the reserves.
To reserve.
Thank you.
And, I mean, I will say again, I understand that goal of getting to 120. It's an admirable goal. Reserves are important. But I think I'm hopeful that the opportunities will present
in the not-too-distant future for us to fully fund that.
Sure.
And I don't think it's an immediate problem that we need to solve.
Charlie, could I ask a quick question? Is what you're saying that every employee would get $1,000, or depending on where they were in step and grade in their position, or?
Everybody gets $1,000.
Oh, okay.
I don't care if you're our lowest paid or our highest paid, everybody gets $1,000.
Dallas and then Jesse.
I would like, if the manager cares to, weigh in on two things. What Bob said about not doing this right now and waiting until we see what money comes in, I'd like to know how you feel about that. And I know it's a bit of a spot on everybody for this $1,000 bonus, because I think that employees should have something. But that prior resolution to get to this 120, I think is really important. I think it's important that we're absolutely, physically, totally responsible, because that will give our employees more money in the future. Once we hit all of these spaces that we've well thought out. But it's easy sometimes to just say, let's wait a while. I think there are just certain things you absolutely have to do to make this place run well. So I just have to know, manager, you're thinking on it, because a lot of what you say, you're the expert and you're who I listen to.
I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. I think if council were to say, okay, let's get $2 million right now, or $2.5 million, or whatever it is, into the reserves, I would be probably very, very consistent with Councilman Hopkins by saying that's quite a chunk to dive into to make the reserves hit what effectively is an arbitrary balance, even though I view it as important, and I think it's something we need to be moving towards. In the proposal as I currently understand it, we're talking about a one-time payment to the employees in the amount of $500,000 and a $500,000 infusion into the general fund reserve. That makes me a little less nervous, and I think it would go well in helping the employees also. And we are moving towards the reserve goal that, again, I think is critical as well. So in that regard, I don't see a lot of risk and reason to be nervous.
Thank you.
You bet.
Jesse.
I just wanted to talk about that resolution that we passed for the 120 days. I think it's important that we take that resolution seriously and just show that we mean to increase our reserves and to maintain that reserves adequately. The information that we got yesterday, it's bad on everybody. It's bad on city council, it's bad on staff, it's bad on management of the city of Casper as an organization. When we have a deficit for Hogadon, Casper Event Center, and then the healthcare fund, it's just unbelievable that, it got to that deficiency that we see. So just to save some face value, I think it would be important to try to hit that 120 days. Otherwise, what's the point? Should we make another resolution just to go down to the, I can't remember the acronym, the government of financial, whatever, 90 days that they require? Should we just keep that? But 120 days I think is admirable. Previous councils kept it above 150 days, which is fantastic. That's my only hesitation in giving one-time bonuses after we were able to get more creative with the Fund 30.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a quick question?
Yes.
The 120-day thing, was that set in the form of a guideline, or was that a mandate? Were we
Policy.
saying that
Just internal policy.
Council saying that this is a mandatory internal policy, or this is a guideline?
I think it was an internal.
Was it a resolution?
Yeah, we passed, I think it was in December was when we passed it.
Well, but my question is, was the wording of the resolution that we shall achieve a 120-day reserve, or was it more in the nature of it would be desirable to arrive at 120 days?
Can we get our hands on the resolution and read it?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that probably is a very good recommendation to actually look at the language.
If it's just a
that,
guideline, guidelines are different than
Thou shalt.
commitments that.
It's not an ordinance,
this
it's
is what
just a
we're gonna do.
resolution.
Yeah,
Well, we
but
said
still
it,
though,
so-
a resolution is, it's gotta have some teeth and you gotta either change it or.
I'd like to see the resolution. Can that be provided to this meeting?
Well, the question, that's an interesting question. The,
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
no, that's okay, because I don't wanna be contrarian in any way to you guys. The question that remains in my mind is, if it ever actually rose to the level of being passed as a resolution. And we've been doing a little research, and at this point, we can't find a resolution that was adopted formally by the council. We most definitely talked about it in a work session or a pre-meeting, and council all gave thumbs up and said, yes, 120 days is our interest. What I'm not understanding is where it went from there. And so that's why I'm a little hesitant to commit to that, because I just can't, we can't find that language as we sit here.
I love your word contrarian.
I still don't have a
remember
problem
being a
living by it.
resolution.
I don't think it got to that point.
I'm
I just
happy with
remember
120
discussion, I
days.
don't remember any.
I'm happy with 120 days. Let's do a thumbs up on 120 days, just so we agree again.
I already got one on the table.
The only thing that
I don't have one.
It's a goal.
I think it's something
Can I
that
call
we,
my own question?
yes, but hold on a second. I think if we're moving towards that goal of 120 days,
Yeah.
it's important. We recognize that, and if we do support Chris's proposal, we are infusing money into that fund, so we're making good on that, and we're saying we are moving towards that goal. And I think that's something that is very important, and shows good faith on our part. So with that being said, is there support for Chris's proposal to put 500 in each of those funds?
Let's get her done.
So we have a new proposal on top of the 225.
Mm-hmm.
Fund 30, 500,000 to bonuses, 500,000 to bring up the reserve.
I like the idea of the bonus. I think they deserve it. I'm just wondering, Mr. Manager, I'm relying on you for being financially proper and conservative here in doing this right now.
Mr. Mayor and Councilman, I appreciate that perspective, and I would say if we were using one-time money to build like a COLA expectation that we have to fund year in and year out every single year, one-time funding is not appropriate in my mind for that kind of a paradigm. But in this scenario, we're talking about a one-time payment, and I am comfortable with that. And we're not using reserve to do it, by the way, which is another important aspect.
I'm good then.
Okay.
So let's take a 3-minute break. I have to use the restroom, and then we'll move right into Hogan Dog Fort Casper.
It's just generally the general fund. I think, I understand it.
Don't know.
Are we done budgeting?
Sounds like
We spent all our money, so I think we're done.
that may be. I just teed it off and
It's always gonna be okay, Charlie, you know how I know it's always gonna be okay. It has to be. Yeah. They were on
Yeah, they're in the budget, so.
But let's say that's not next door, they want to go up this Holiday Inn, and then they did, and then
I would wish some of those businesses would actually
Are we done?
Wintertime sometime. Maybe that was just.
What is it, Carter? It's this guy. That's what it is.
I'm gonna sign my name.
I'm gonna say what you're gonna I think we're in a
It's all Mark's fault.
Enjoy.
I got a kid.
I don't, let's talk to the chief. How are you? Oh, it's coming along. Is it? It's still progressing? Good. Yeah, when I saw the brakes on when you walked in yesterday.
Oh, yeah, I've been in this for about 2 years now or so.
Well, I knew you had been for quite a while.
Yeah, it's just kind of a semi-covered kind of.
Oh, okay, okay.
But it's working great. And I'll tell you, if comfort-wise, other than that cost $2,200, people would do that just for the comfort. It really is very comfortable.
Oh, they're good.
Good.
I was worried when I saw it.
Well, don't get old.
Yeah. Well, that's inevitable, right? It beats the alternative.
Well, I'm not sure, but this getting old is such a great idea. I wish I would have thought of it a long time ago.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see you, Mark, thanks.
But the speed zone.
Yes.
The speed zone.
Huge. That almost brought applause.
That'll be on the front page.
Next, let's change King Boulevard to 40.
Hey, there you go.
In your discussion, in your thought process with regard to.
Yeah, I'll just watch some kid's gonna get hit across the street.
The only time I found it really handy was when, those kids all leave for lunch. When they leave for lunch, they're in a hurry.
Well,
And sometimes they'll pull out pretty close. I don't think I've ever gotten one there, but I've caught myself. 32, 34.
well,
I don't see that as being.
I'm like Alice, I'll go around that area.
Okay.
But, you know, the Senate, whatever, would say, oh, it's achieving, it's reducing the congestion of traffic.
Yeah, I would agree.
But, you know,
This is a very huge.
just like I've looked at that and looked at it and looked at it and looked at it. I just can't picture it, but I could understand logic of if you just made it a 20-mile-an-hour zone from Poplar, from east of Poplar all the way through downtown. But the way that it is now, you're going east on Collins there, east of Poplar. There's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit sign. And rather quickly, there's a 20-mile-an-hour school zone sign. And then, the school zone kind of ends. And so I presume there's a little section there that's 30, and then there's the downtown 20 thing.
I'll tell you another
To
one.
me, it would just make so much more sense to go clear back upstream and say, okay, from Walnut on down there, it's a 20-mile-an-hour zone all the time or something.
I'll tell you another one. It's even worse than that. If you ever driven up 59 and go up, we're about 10 miles out of town.
Not for a long time. But
Oh, it goes like 45, 55, 45, 55, 30, 45.
yeah.
Get your lap, going up 59. Matter of fact, many, many years ago, I got 2 tickets the same day. On that
It's
same
like
street.
on outer drive, we got 60 to 40 to 50 to 40.
Yeah.
Going from east to west.
Well, see, I have the perfect remedy for outer drive. I drive my Jeep, and it'll only go about 45 or so.
There you go.
I won't forget that.
I'm the guy that's always got all the other cars backed up behind me. My
That guy.
four-cylinder
And
Jeep
that
just-
60 section, they do get right behind you if you're going 45.
But that's just as fast as my Jeep goes. But
Hey, Bob, you wanna split this with me?
I will if you want. You want some, Sean?
I'm good. I've
Oh, yeah?
had tons of coffee
Please.
today. I'll do a Cheyenne's back.
Thank you, sir. That's good.
Did all right.
Good shot.
You can have yourself back, Pete.
Well, we still haven't picked up all our seats.
Anything for you, Mr. Mayor?
Andrew can do his in two. Anytime I ask him.
I hear a challenge. Cause I'm
You don't have number two.
Yikes. That was our cleaning up for number 4.
My work day is over.
We have an executive session.
Anybody ask you a question? I don't know.
We seem to have one.
Carter may not like it.
Supposed to be dialed in, man.
I'm gonna get the plant furniture discussion by the end of the year.
I think we've kind of finished Can't imagine this is gonna take.
You just gotta say, put the hammer down and hold it. And I am. My generation. Who do you work for? Yeah. You know Bobby.
I don't know where Carter.
Well, I can tee you up. I think what you're saying is right in line with everything we're doing here, and we should. Next problem.
Is that a motion?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to next part of the meeting. Charlie wanted to clarify something really quick.
My suggestion on bonuses was for full-time employees.
Yeah, that was my assumption.
I want to clarify that.
Okay. All right, Carter, you gonna tee up Tim?
You betcha. In lieu of starting the process where we are proposing business plans that would help govern the operation of many of your leisure services, if you will, moving forward, we do think we need a starting point with just a few of those operations, the list of which would be included on your agenda. And so what I'm hoping we can do is get your thumbs up to allow us to have that in our quiver, as it were, so that we can start in more of a positive trajectory with regard to the development of those respective business plans. And so if I could have Tim just give you a real brief description as to why we think we need some rate increases for those three, that'd be great.
Mr. Mayor, I need to say one thing about something that Charlie just brought up. Don't you think that part-time employees should get a half a bonus, Mr. Mayor? How many we got? We got 50 of them.
Tracy, how many do we have part-time?
Some of them haven't even, they just started.
Yeah, how many of those are
We
long-term?
have part-time, seasonal, and variable employees.
I don't know how you.
And that's where it gets kind of dicey account.
We have 122, this is as of May 1st, 122 part-time, 57 seasonal, and 55 variable. So, total is 690.
Seasonal employee might be a lifeguard that just works for 8 weeks, and you're gonna double their salary.
Go ahead, Jesse.
or their
Are
wages.
part-time employees able to buy an insurance plan for themselves?
Not unless they work so many hours to get into that threshold and do it for.
Do you know how many hours?
I think it's an average of 30 hours, over a 16
Okay. Just interesting that this council that's part-time gets health insurance and part-time doesn't, since we're talking about part-time.
I didn't know any of that, so that's why I'm just asking.
That's a reasonable answer.
I'd like to leave it up to you anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Person, I don't know if it's elected, it's an ACA thing. I don't know if elected officials call it different. Affordable care Act.
You're good to go, Tim.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, we talked a lot about fee increases when we were going through the cost recovery stuff. This is just straight in line with what the direction was from council at that time. What you'll see is we're looking at specifically Hogadon, Fort Casper, and the Casper Ice Arena. And what staff has done is looked at comparables around the region, looked at what costs could be bared by the folks that are using those facilities. And so what you'll see here is modest increases in the fees that are associated with those facilities to better recover the costs that are being burdened. And as much as you talked today about budget, it's right in line with what we're thinking as well, which is a pay-to-play environment. We're trying to recover more of our costs so that less of the subsidy is required. In a real nutshell, and I was challenged by the mayor, that's what I'm going to do my presentation at, but I'll entertain any questions.
Where's Andrew? I don't want to shove that in his face. Well done, Tim. Bob?
Yeah, these were consistent with what we talked about in terms of cost recovery factors through all that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor and Councilman, to the point that what you see here is kind of a stair step.
Okay.
So we didn't take in all the fees that we had talked about previously. We're thinking maybe over a 2-year period we'd incorporate everything, including all the other facilities that you don't see in these fees right here.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Just one brief comment. From this point forward, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to fees for any of our amenities, I would like that to be a for information only discussion as opposed to presenting it to us for our approval. Meaning, you guys decide.
Yep.
Jesse?
Yeah, I would, just going on with that too, I'd like to know if we do happen to, you know, if it doesn't work and we're maybe pricing our way out of it and we see usership go down incredibly, I would just like to know if we bring that back down. Or if it fluctuates, I'd just like to be informed if that does change. If you guys find that appropriate for us to know.
Tim, I've got a couple of questions, and tonight might or might not be the right time, but specifically with reference to Hogadon, because I'm a lot more familiar with that up there. I was looking through the budget book trying to figure out for sure just how much it is, and I think that the numbers in there, what the city gets off of the from Bruce Lamberson off the rentals. It was extremely difficult, if not impossible, for me to figure out what, if anything, that we're getting for the off the ski school, Casper Mountain Racers, and it's totally impossible to look in there and see anything coming in for food and beverage. And one thing that I will tell you, you know, and I do know something about ski areas and that stuff, and especially in the small ski areas, where the small ski areas make money, is food and beverage, ski rentals, and running a ski school. It's just like putting the movie onto the screen at the movie theater. You don't make money selling your tickets to bring the people in. You put the movie up there to get them in so that you can sell them some overpriced popcorn and that kind of thing. Same thing, especially at small ski areas. You know, you turn the chair left and provide the skiing just so that you can get them in and feed them some overpriced food and that stuff. And so, Tim, something that I know you're still kind of new in your position, and so I don't mean to beat on you about this, but that I'm going to be real curious to look at not only there, but at the event center and the golf course, is, you know, if we're getting a fair amount for those franchises, those concessions, because, and I saw, I think it said like there was $6,000 from Mountain Sports for the rentals. You know, I'd kind of want to look at and see what's, you know, that's 6,000 out of how much gross sales there, and some things like that. But and tonight might or might not be the time for that. But
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, all of those contracts are real specific to the different operations, so they vary across the board. Like for instance, your assessment of the food and beverage is dead on. Just so you know, with our contract with Spectra, where that is that we get 90% of the profit that is realized there, and they get 10%. So they have some skin in the game, but by and large, what is critical to our success up there would be the food and beverage piece for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you talk about Casper Mountain Racers and Mountain Sports contracts as well. Those vary as well, with a very small percentage that we get.
I
And then
just
we
couldn't
also
find
have one
those.
where they pay rent. You wouldn't find it in your budget book, but we do. And then those contracts are up for renewal, which a lot of them are coming up real quick. So we'll revisit the terms of the contracts, if you will, to see what they're making and to see what might be fair for us, especially with the significant upgrades.
I just wanted to bring that out, you know, and bounce it out there.
Do you remember eating an $8 apple on the top of Steamboat?
I never eat things like apples and donuts or
That's what they go for.
It's some good stuff.
And it's not overpriced, right? So,
Yeah. I've had $12 beers.
Any other questions for Tim? If not,
Good.
we're good to go.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks,
Thank you
Tim.
very much.
Community Development Block Grant Funding.
With regard to this conversation, members of the council, this is certainly one of those conversations that also has budget implications. If you'll recall in the budget message that I provided you, there is some discussion that is consistent with a memo you've gotten on this topic that would indicate the question of whether or not the CDBG is worth its bang for the buck for our community anymore. As you are all aware, that is an entitlement program that City of Casper has been eligible for many, many years. And over that time, the funding has eroded, the services available through that program have eroded, and the restrictions have become, you know, much more multiple in their volume, and the difficulty by which we follow up on the reporting and the administration and so forth has become much, much more cumbersome.
these items?
No, I think, no, that's a different sheet, that's a different sheet. So the question becomes, and it's a $368,000 question really, because that's what the amount of funding we would be getting if we would continue in this program amounts to. But what that doesn't indicate is what the, you know, the less tangible costs are that it would take for us to follow that up and continue to deal with those kinds of issues. And so I've asked Liz and Joy to come here tonight to entertain any questions or to hear additional detail and determine whether or not you are comfortable moving in the direction of rejecting those entitlement funds for our community moving forward.
Chris, did you have something you wanted to say? Or do you want to wait for Liz?
I was just gonna ask Liz where it goes, what's it been spent on?
Mr. Mayor, members of council. As Mr. Napier said in a little bit of further detail, the Trump administration did announce that this is the last year going forward July 1st for CDBG funding. So we are looking at a final allocation as of July 1st of the 368. In the past, we come forward to you each year with what we call an annual action plan in which you hear how the funding would be deployed within the Casper community. And in the past, we typically have 20% of it that is allowed for Joy's salary. We've allowed 15% for the CATSI bus tokens. That's typically right off the top. And that is allowed. And then we've had projects that have really, truly benefited Life Steps Campus. Over the last 4 years, we've been able to use the federal funds to put $760,000 into the Life Steps campus. Improvements such as the HVAC, fire suppression, a lot of the amenities that we have to build that into housing. We've also done emergency repairs for low-income homeowners. We've done the facade grant program. Facade grant program has been a well-received program for our business owners downtown, as well as in North Casper. But again, we've had the amount depreciated so much that we've gone from potentially doing 20 facade grants in a year down to 2, because the amount has just decreased since 2007 exponentially. We've also been able to do some abatement in the past. Most recently, Joy was able to help with the rescue mission project over on Park Street to do a demolition of some existing small buildings that were there so that they could do that new facility. And yet, as Mr. Napier said, that reporting has become so onerous as to how we can even do abatement and what we have to put into play to be able to tear a blighted property down. And this is where even doing small projects really costs a lot of human capital. And from an efficiency standpoint, we have not seen that really over about the last 4 years. HUD's requirements have increased with the federal funding, and our output has not been as significant. But to Councilman Walsh's, I think we have seen great benefit in the Life Steps campus. We have been able not to use general fund dollars to improve a facility that we own, but been able to put $760,000 into it and have that occupied now with low-income housing resident programs.
Just to follow up. So I read the memo. You're in favor of not accepting it this year, right?
Your Honor, members of council, correct. And a lot of it it's a staffing and reporting and compliance.
I get it. It's like the stimulus grants.
Yes, so the word free money,
Charlie and then Dallas.
So for those of you who haven't been up to Life Steps campus, what the Casper Housing Authority has done up there is truly amazing. It's beautiful, and it's a place where people who have been lost and without direction for a long, long time have found a way to make a stand and really start having a life. And it's just a wonderful thing to see. Liz, with the CDBG grant, now, the only loss of funding to CATSI and the bus program would be in the free tokens, and how would that affect our ability to sustain the current schedule and availability of CATSI?
excellent question, Your Honor, members of council. Again, we give, through the CDBG program, $35,000 for the subsidized bus tokens. That money is just a pass-through. It does not go into their operating budget. They are not allowed to claim that as revenue. And so for the CATSI budget, which we'll be presenting, I know we'll come forward with that on the June 12th work session, it does not impact them. For them to be able to give subsidized bus tokens to low-income riders, we would need to potentially look to them to apply for 1 cent funding so that they could come forward and give that out. They might want to rely on Community Action Partnership, which had been structured that way initially to provide funding to pass out bus tokens. They may need to apply as an organization for foundation grants, for instance, through the Community Foundation. But again, this was not ever revenue from CDBG that went into a private organization. And again, remember, CATSI is a private organization we contract with. But by federal law, we are not giving them revenue. It was strictly to be passed through to the residents in Casper that needed a bus token. But I do believe that there are other sources, and I would believe also that they would come forward with a 1 cent application to this body for the tokens, unless Community Action Partnership would do it on their behalf.
Just follow up. This is a quasi-personnel matter, but we all know that Joy has done as much for the underserved populations in this community as anyone else in Casper.
Yes.
And we're taking away your salary. So, are you
I know you probably can't say anything specific, but are you comfortable with how we're gonna be able to take care of Joy?
Your Honor and members of council, we already have accounted for that in the budget that was presented to you.
Thank you.
You betcha.
Dallas.
Why don't we, if it's the last year, why don't we just take the money? Why not take the money if it's 1 year?
Your Honor, members of council, again, in the budget message that Mr. Napier put together, from an efficiency with staff time and federal reporting and audit compliance, it has become extremely difficult to deploy that capital. We have approximately $320,000 from prior entitlement funds that Ms. Clark would spend the next year deploying. We have projects in place that we would get that $328,000 totally down to a zero. And we would also see the efficiencies better spent with some upcoming projects with the census, which is again a project that reaches out to touch our health and human service needs within this organization to make sure that that complete count committee is up and running. So from a employee work standpoint, staff's recommendation is not to accept the $368,000.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I think that's a fair question, because indeed you want to know what we are going to leverage in the form of outcome and work product with Joy's time over the next year that we wouldn't get to do if indeed we move forward with the acceptance of those entitlement funds. The other thing I think you need to understand too, in fairness to the question that you're asking, is that there would be projects that we would move forward with if indeed your direction was to accept the entitlement funding that would help the low-income population in our community. So, on the flip side of the coin, where we're talking about things that Joy would be doing and that are important and her talents would be utilized in different directions, we would also say that there are projects that we would use that funding for that if we deny the entitlement funding would mean wouldn't get done.
It just seems unusual that we're turning down money.
The big pain it took us. Mike.
Are you saying that it costs us more to accept this $368,000 than $368,000 if we, if we had a net gain loss?
Your Honor, members of council, the relationship with HUD has become extremely challenging and yes, extremely costly in the amount of staff and jumping through the hoops.
Can you put a number to that? Because if it costs us $200,000 to get $368,000, then it seems to me like it's a net gain. If it costs $400 to get the 368, then that's not very smart. If it's just so demoralizing to your department, that's certainly a factor that's got to be considered. But because I'm kind of with Dallas a little bit, that if there's some free money out there, and I know free is never free, but if it costs us $200,000 to get 368, if it costs $360,000 to get 368, well, that's.
Well, I just hate cutting funding that goes to these folks that really need it. Because I just see them all the time down there, sleeping on park benches and just, they don't have a voice unless somebody here does it for them.
Go ahead, Liz.
Your Honor, members of council, the cost to it. I would put the staff salary to that. I would also have to consider the risk of an audit finding, which we have successfully avoided for 4 years. And with audit findings comes payback. If we do something wrong, which is becoming more and more of a challenge, then we are at risk to pay back. We have had to pay back, as some of these council members would remember, where there have been errors, and we've had to pay back to the tune of $41,000. That was public, it was talked about in the paper. And that was a cost. And, but to sit, and I can't give you an answer as to what the cost is on that. I will say that as we've looked at projects for this upcoming year that we would bring forward, because we need to move on this quickly, we would look at entertaining potentially a public services project of sidewalk replacement and maintenance in North Casper, and along with bus tokens. And the reason we say that is because of the environmental requirements on each and every project that would have to be undertaken. We're trying to minimize the number of individual environmental reports that we would have to do. They are extremely time consuming and cost consuming. So you would see that in an annual action plan presented to this body if you decide to move forward with that funding. But we have looked ahead at what the needs would be, just to give you an idea, to serving the low-income population, and would look at directing it to a public services need in North Casper.
Jesse and then Chris.
I was curious to know, so we're able to provide bus tokens. I was curious to know what else we're able to provide with that funding for people with no income, such as kids. The great idea that a town, it's about our size, in Washington State, is for kids 18 and younger. If they're using the bus, they use that bus pass, and then that gets them for free to use some of the city services, such as your pool, your recreation center. And the idea behind it, of course, for having kids use the facilities, that's what they're there for to begin with. Using the parks, keeping them out of trouble, so they're not getting into trouble, breaking into cars and things like that. So I'd be curious to know if that would be eligible to provide that type of service with the remaining funds, since it sounds like staff doesn't want to accept current funds, but use the remaining balance towards a project such as that.
Your Honor, members of council, the tokens that we do handle now do go towards all demographic groups, including the young people.
Okay.
We service our veterans. Joy keeps track of who receives the tokens. Veterans are very much a point. The elderly, of course, from a disability standpoint, young people, and families.
Okay.
So we do have that categorically tracked.
Great.
Chris.
I'm not gonna pretend to know anything about how this grant works, but, if, like Liz nodded when I said it's like the stimulus grant, you can't just go spend the money. You have to hunt, and it's such a nightmare. I managed the Warwick Police Department when that first came out. I'd never do it again, and that was at least this much money. It's absolutely ridiculous, the restrictions, and then trying to spend it, and the big bright line thing that I heard is you said you have about $350 left to spend. That's from prior years, which shows you how hard it is for them, and that was your full-time job, to go spend this money. I understand why you would not want to do it, and I'm fine with not supporting it.
Go ahead, Liz.
One other thing I wanted to add, Your Honor. The state of Wyoming does receive CDBG funds, and they would have an allocation this next year. We would be able to apply through them also, if we turned over our entitlement for a program that Ms. Clark might find worthy. If there is suddenly a program, something new and a new initiative, we could be an applicant to the state of Wyoming and their entitlement funds for this next year. And again, that might be, again, a way out or an option, pardon me, for CATSI from an application program to go to them for the CDBG dollars for bus tokens too. So we do have that available to us, but someone else's staff is managing that. That again allows Ms. Clark time to focus on other opportunities for our low-income population, looking potentially for other less restrictive grants opportunities.
Dallas.
Is this the council's way of kicking the feds out of Casper and their red tape?
Your Honor, members of council, again, we do have other grants that we oversee. We've got a current active one with the EPA with brownfields in the downtown core that is much easier to manage with the EPA. We also obviously have our federal funding with transit through the FTA as well as federal highways. And again, those grants are easier to manage. And our hope is to bring another grant opportunity forward through an FTA to match with the Midwest project, should you choose to move forward with that. Less onerous ones though.
I like the headline of Dallas.
Huh?
I like the headline.
Yeah, well, there's a guy running for governor, Rex Bramall, that wants to get rid of all government, federal government, and wants to put him in jail. When he becomes governor, he just sends the state police out and throws them out of their buildings. There's a lot of people that are gonna vote
Thanks
for
for
him.
pointing out someone I'm not gonna vote for.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's an interesting, what he says is pretty interesting, but it does involve, and I see what she's saying, it involves all this red tape, but I know why it's there in these projects, and that's to try to funnel some of the money for the poor people without getting siphoned off elsewhere. So I understand the reason for it, cause there isn't really anybody out there protecting the poor people, there really isn't. And we've done some cutting on them already. So, and I'm thinking 1 year left, I mean, how bad is that? I don't know.
Joey.
I mean, nobody cares more about the people that they serve than the people that serve them. And so I don't take this recommendation lightly. I support staff's judgment that it's just no longer worth it. And if you haven't sat through the annual report that has to be written and looked at the detail
It's a
that
3 inches,
requires.
I recall.
And just the report itself tells you how extensive the regulations are. That our city manager has given us a balanced budget. It's not a budget with a lot of wiggle room, but it is balanced. And if this is what they're recommending, I support it.
Is this what you recommend?
Thank you.
We spend good tax dollars on these huge government forms. These cost us plenty of money to get these huge government forms, you know.
Then we're killing trees, by golly.
And you were killing forests, that's what we're killing. Maybe Bramall has a good idea, I don't know if it is.
Well, that's what was called the Civil War.
You're not ever gonna hear me jump on this bandwagon about kicking out the federal government and that kind of.
He wants to take Yellowstone Park away from him, says we'll take all the stuff away that's in Wyoming, and then we get the money for it, it infuses our economy with $1 billion.
Well, we went
The first wildfire we had, we
die because we have no other resources coming
We'd be
in. Genius
fighting-
idea.
We'd be fighting the Marine Corps, I'm afraid.
Toll gate's 200 yards in front of Yellowstone Park.
Go ahead, Carter.
All right, the last formal item we have for you this evening would be with regard to the RFP potentially for the Plains Furniture buildings, and remember that includes the livery building as well. For sake of this discussion, what you've received is a couple options to consider with regard to the basic approach for how this could go. What we need to know is whether or not you are comfortable with the language, and if not, what you would prefer to see, or if you simply need more time to look over that information to, give us direction later, that's fine too. We just want to take a shot at whether or not you are ready to give us an insight so we can move forward and get those buildings happening in the way you want to see it happen.
Chris and then Jesse.
I did not review them very well. In fact, as I was going through it, I think I had a run-on, so I didn't see a separate option as I was reading them. I've been looking at the budget stuff, so I'm really not prepared to.
Same here. Jesse.
Yeah, so I brought it up last regular council meeting, and I wanted to bring it up for perhaps direction to put it out to people, and a great tee up for maybe Kada would say, what could you do with this space that you're going to utilize it to stimulate the economy or to diversify it? I think that's a great project for them that you hand it over and say, hey, what can you do? Prove yourselves.
Exactly.
And maybe they can come up with an incredible concept that we can review. Something that was brought forward to me, like I mentioned before, a farmer's market that ties in directly with David Street Station, where you're going to have people down there almost all the time, hopefully all the time. It sounds like daycares and other summer programs are already kind of booked, where can they park buses and things like that. So it's going to bring people and families down there, and that's what it's for, and that's what it's about. So tying in a farmer's market makes sense, in my opinion, where they can set up shop permanently, and we can have access to fresh Wyoming food and goods. And as I mentioned before, there's somebody that would like to give a proposal or presentation on what that would look like and those possibilities on how they would achieve that. And as I mentioned, also a commercial kitchen that would be available to use or rent or lease out. And then you have people that were able to use that commercial kitchen that's certified by health inspectors and everything else. And at that point, then they can start selling their local Wyoming goods to downtown restaurants or restaurants nationwide, statewide, whatever. The important thing is it's Wyoming goods that's being sold in restaurants or on the shelves in stores. So what I propose to you is perhaps entertaining those options before we give the thumbs for an RFP process for that property.
Any support for Jesse on that?
Well, just,
Go ahead, Bob.
I'm not sure what you're thinking. You want entrepreneurs to come and tell us what they're gonna do, is that?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what an RFP does.
Well,
That's what
what I heard before with the RFP is we don't care what they're going to do. We're going to accept the highest bid and be done with it. So whether they demo the historic building or not, we don't care. It's going to be a highest bid. So before we get to that point, when it's still ours and we have the ability to tailor it to what we want to see, because it's our property, it's our downtown, and how it's going to fit into our downtown, is what are the possibilities. So then you do have people like I'm talking about.
Okay, well,
saying,
perhaps I'm misunderstanding what I read here, but we've got one, option two is to just sell it.
Right.
Option one, you're requesting people to give us ideas,
Okay.
which would be the RFP.
Right.
And that's the one that would give us the opportunity to see what entrepreneurs wanna do. I mean, we've seen, what was the last one? We had 7 proposals. And so we know there's people out there that wanna do that, so.
So option one, that's option one.
Option one, as I understand it, is the RFP, is that correct?
Right.
We're asking for proposals, we
Right.
look at them, we.
Show us what you
decide
wanna
we
do.
might- Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the possibilities.
Go ahead, Charlie. You had a comment you want to make.
I haven't looked at it either, so,
Yeah.
but I support the concept that Jesse is promoting here. I do think we have an obligation to try to make the city whole on this property. But the reason I voted for the purchase, and it was controversial then, and it remains controversial, is so that we as city leaders would have some influence on what happens with this property. And if we simply say we're gonna sell it to the highest bidder, I think we've abandoned those duties. We have a responsibility to look at these proposals, not just in terms of how much money are they gonna bring back into our coffers, but what will that do for our city's core? And whether it's a farmer's market or some other idea, we should judge the idea on its merits, not purely how much money we get for it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Dallas.
I agree with Charlie, and I agree with Bob, and I agree with Jesse. But I'm telling you, and I know I say this, but I'm gonna say it again. I think the tribes are kind of interested in that property because they can put legally a casino down.
I'm down for it.
And I know it's a giggle, but it works. You cannot, I went, when I was in Phoenix last week, I went down to see the one they built. That would bring in thousands of people weekly and would bring in tons of money, and people would be so happy downtown with that.
I don't think this process negates that.
No, I know.
If they wanna do it,
That's my
have at
point.
it.
I like that idea.
And
Let's
let's
get a hold of the tribes,
let's
Dallas.
make this a very public, what
Dallas,
does the
let's go talk to
community
the
of
tribes.
Casper want?
We can do that.
Space.
Made eye contact. Chris, would
I
you?
need to see it
Go ahead,
for
Chris.
myself.
And they'll
Well,
pay.
I don't think very many of us have gone through, it sounds like Bob has read it. I skimmed that RFP and missed the just sell it part. the RFP spells out a lot of stuff about,
Show us.
I can't really speak to it because I didn't read it that closely, but nobody else did either, so why don't we talk about this after we have a chance to read it?
Is that okay, Carter?
Oh, absolutely. You bet.
And then Dallas and I can go talk to the
And
tribes.
then
That'll give you guys
and
enough
work
time.
out-
Yeah, you guys will
I'll
have the
bring
tribe
it
over
down,
next week,
remember
all right?
Well,
Have
I,
them submit an RFP.
excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I got a comment on, and, you know, and I appreciate what Dallas is saying. But, you know, several years ago, the people of the state of Wyoming had a referendum and very soundly voted against gambling. And until there's another vote like that, I am dead set against any form of inviting gambling into town. Because I think, you know, the people voted on that, and their voice was really clear. And frankly, I thought that it was not the most neighborly of things that the tribes did, saying, well, under the Indian Gaming Act, we can do this anyway, we don't care what you guys said.
Well, it is lawful for them.
Well, it is lawful, but
And it's a
that
top
was
flight
not
business.
real neighborly of them. But,
They're just getting back the money the white man took from them years ago.
well, that's true.
They're way off base.
We can have this discussion.
Well, we're just kidding here, we're just kidding.
Yeah, no, but I'm serious though about being opposed to,
But there's
to that.
been
I like
other cases where there's been a resounding.
We're going off the
majority-
rails.
How in the hell do I get on?
Going off the rails.
So are we?
Sorry,
are we going-
Mr. Mayor, I brought this up.
This is gonna, this will be my legacy as mayor.
So I'm confused. Are we
Pacheco went off
go
and-
with an RFP?
What's that?
Are we go with an RFP?
I think we need to have a little bit of time, so
Yeah,
that, and not everybody has had a chance to really go over and look at everything, and then we're gonna come back to it.
Okay.
What are we gonna do about my idea for the 6 cent? Can we give a thumbs up or whatever our vote is to at least have the manager look into it, give us some timeline, see what we have to do, see if anybody else is interested?
Does anybody else want to have that conversation?
Well, in a spare time, you know, you could look into it, maybe.
I'm
I'd
interested to see what the process is.
I mean, we could look at the process, I mean, but.
What's it take? I don't know.
I'll support it because I think we should learn more about the 6 cent option because we've only done that with respect to the
Or a
specific
quarter
library
cents
project.
or
And our sister
half
city
cent, whatever
Cheyenne
you
has
know.
used it extensively and I think we should learn a little bit about
And
how
it's
that's
bailed
used.
them out, just like it would bail us out, and we have
Whether
a
it's this or something else.
perfect way of doing it, and it benefits our police department and our sheriff's department. Think it out, think it over.
Agenda review, anything specific we need
So
to
does
go
that
over?
mean we're gonna, do we get,
He's gonna do some investigating for us.
so we give it a thumbs up
We
so
did.
we can investigate it?
Yeah,
I give my thumbs up.
Thank you.
Anything for agenda?
Go to camp, go to boot camp, Sean.
Um,
You get a hold of these tribes.
Yeah.
We're done with budget, right?
Yeah.
That's an
Kind of.
interesting question, yeah.
Kind of, Bob,
I
kind of.
appreciate that, yeah. The next step, if you will, with regard to the budget is the big step, of course, which is the formal approval in, the middle of June, your second business meeting, which would be the 19th. We will be hosting a public hearing in that regard, and, certainly that means taking comment and that kind of thing.
What's that on?
The budget,
Is that a one-time
the
vote?
adoption, it's a
One vote.
one-time, one vote, exactly, resolution that would be done. You will notice on the 12th, however, that there are some discussions here that, could potentially have some budgetary impact. Most notably, the Casper Area Transportation Coalition, discussion. That is a discussion that assumes some savings by which we would gain through some efficiencies that we think could be implemented. And that's fundamentally the bottom line with regard to that discussion. You should know that there will be people who will come and want to visit that would say, we disagree. We don't think that efficiencies would be helpful and that kind of thing. So that is a real basic table setting, if you will, for that conversation that does have budgetary impact should we reverse course, if you will, of trying to gain some benefit from efficiencies we want to implement. We do anticipate also, however, being able to talk to the auditors on that date, wherein they will come and share with you what they found by way of an interim sort of audit, if you will, to see if indeed they have implemented, they being the event center spectrum, have implemented what it is that they said they would in order to not go through what we went through back in the earlier part of the current fiscal year. So I look forward to that conversation. I think you'll find some benefit in it as well. Beyond that, as far as budgetary implications are concerned, I think that would pretty well wrap it up. I want to thank you for the conversations that we've had the last couple of days. I think your input has been very prudent, it's been value added, and very, very helpful for me by way of direction that we needed. And I want to thank you for your investment in our employees. I think they are gaining a lot by way of your vote of confidence in that regard. So thank you.
Well, let me just say this, I want to thank you guys for your hard work and the time and effort that you guys have put into the budget. I know it's not easy to put it together, so
Thank you.
Thank you for your effort, everybody.
But it's balanced, isn't it?
Balance.
All right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Tom, you should, under my version of balance, not bots, you should copyright that budget tool of yours. You'll make millions. It's very cool.
That is post-retirement from the city of Casper.
You can retire now, get out of
And
here.
he can only retire when you say it's okay.
Amen, amen.
He signed a patent agreement when he hired on, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Intellectual property.
Charlie, do you have any legislative updates?
I'll
you
do
wanna
this
talk about?
quickly. I'm going to try and summarize a two-day board meeting in 2 minutes. I'll do my best. The main order of business at the board meeting was to talk about all the interim topics that the Management Council for the legislature approved. And as you all know, these guys work year-round. They're in session for 40 days, but all the rest of the time they're preparing for that session. And so WHAM is monitoring and commenting on quite a few topics that are of interest and that will have a direct impact on us. So I'm just going to kind of go over these briefly, but all of the committees have certain topics that they're addressing, some of them more relevant to us than others. The Judiciary Committee is looking at district and circuit court security issues. The Appropriation Committee is looking at the entire budgeting process. They're stepping back and just saying, how does the state run? And that's going to obviously carry over into the Revenue Committee in terms of how do we fund the state's services. They are also looking at a gaming commission and possibly establishing a gaming commission. The Revenue Committee is the one that is of most interest because they are, again, looking at the fiscal structure and how does the state fund its operations. They are looking at the blockchain and cryptocurrency options. They are also looking at the fifth penny, and is it possible for that to become a permanent part of our sales tax structure? And that would then lead to a stronger argument to eliminate the direct distribution that we worry about with every legislative session. The Education Committee is looking at school resource officer funding and how can we put that into the state budget. Corporations Code is looking at election code revisions, and for those of you running this fall, you have a whole new set of rules you have to follow that weren't in place before as far as reporting contributions, etc. They are also looking at open meetings law and public records notices. A good chunk of our budget, speaking of budgetary matters, we spend advertising things in the paper per state statute. And there's some questions that have been raised about, is that really necessary? Is it effective? Are there other ways to do that that would be less expensive? And of course, there's an ongoing dispute about that with the Wyoming Press Association. The Transportation Committee is looking at the statewide transportation plan, including non-motorized transportation. And there's a lot of software updates that they're looking at to increase efficiencies of the road system and how the whole transportation system works. The Minerals Committee is going to look at the possibility of creating an energy czar to basically control, to monitor and report to the legislature on all aspects of our extractive industries and how they are doing. They are also looking at the lien and assessment problem, which is very directly relevant to us because we've had a serious problem where we have people out of state that own properties. They abandon those properties, they deteriorate, we take money out of our budget to tear them down, and we have no way to get that back. And so the state legislature is looking at how can we put liens on these properties and hold these people accountable when that happens, so that we don't have to pick up the cost. The Labor Committee is looking at the seasonal worker exemption to the workman's compensation statutes. We have people who are mowing lawns for 3 months in the summer and then collecting unemployment because our state law allows that. And then even though it's basically a seasonal job. And so it's unclear as to where we can, what the rules are on that, but they're trying to clarify what does it mean to be an employee and when can you, and that's a cost that we can incur too. Corporations Committee is looking at this community development district that I told you guys about that was being proposed down in Cheyenne, which would basically be creating a portion of a municipality that sort of has its own rules, its own taxing structure, and its own entity status, but it's kind of part of the city but not part of the city. And if this goes through, a district of this sort could be proposed in Casper. They're also looking at the surface water drainage issue, which we brought to their attention, and they are looking very seriously at how can we create a surface water utility, since it hasn't been effectively done virtually anywhere. And then the WHAM annual conference is in Pinedale, the 13th, 14th, 15th of next month. I encourage you to try to attend if you can. There will be a gubernatorial. It's in Pinedale. It starts at noon on Wednesday and it finishes at noon on Friday. And there will be a gubernatorial forum. I assume Mr. Rammel will be there. I'm sure he will. And you can hear directly from him and the others of what they have planned for us. And they will all be invited to a WHAM reception that evening for more informal conversation and discussion about why they're running and what they're going to do if they win. And then we went through WHAM's strategic plan in some detail, but I'm not going to take you through that. So that was the WHAM board meeting. There will be another board meeting in Pinedale, and anyone is welcome to attend.
Thanks, Charlie. Dallas.
Very quickly, I would like to propose that we have the summer barbecue meeting with the state legislators, perhaps county commissioners. We have a nice little barbecue up at Hogadon, and invite everybody up, and we can exchange ideas about some of these issues, such as a possible 6 cent. But I found that the legislators like that, what we did with the dinner, that you put it together last fall, I think. I'm told that if we make very clear to them what we want and explain it, they're very capable of taking it down there and proposing it and supporting us. And so I hope we can do that this summer sometime.
Is that something council would like to have? Or something like that, a little barbecue?
If I may be very selfish, I look forward to the entire summer for 9 months out of the year, and I just do not spend it
Doing
as a
council.
politician barbecue.
Even if it's a good one? And you bring your lovely wife, you bring your lovely wife
You guys
with
can
you?
fill me in on how it went.
We can get free food.
I think we should have 2 a year, though.
2 summers.
One in the
Oh,
summer.
Charlie, you had one more thing you wanted to say.
About a year and a half ago, I invited all the council members over to my house, and we were going to have a barbecue there, but the weather didn't cooperate. But Lorraine and I are talking about doing that again. And the rules are, we can do this. It is not a meeting as long as we don't discuss council business, which I think is healthy for a council to get together and have to talk about other things with each other. So I don't know how, if y'all would be interested in that. It'd be very low key, and it would just be a social get together so we could kind of spend some time with each other without all of the pressure of making these decisions. Sounds marvelous.
I'm not sure.
So
what I'm talking about,
I'll
but
we'll look at
There's gonna be a lot of previously staring at each other.
That's just kind of my opening, and then I'll bring up some.
Can we talk about gaming casinos?
Yes.
But I will, we'll talk about
Charlie
dates
wants
and
to
then
have
start kicking around some dates to do that. No obligation. I think last time we even invited the press so they could make sure that we weren't talking about business. I don't think anybody came, but you guys are very welcome. And the idea is just to kind of, just relax for a little bit with each other. And of course, the city manager, and I would invite department heads and their spouses as well. Invite the whole city, So,
570.
we have a pretty good sized backyard, so.
Round the table, anybody have anything they want to share? Chris?
CNFR is coming up, and the question I had, and I just haven't had, there hasn't been a good opportunity to get with you. They were asking if lot 8 and 10 are gonna be graded. It must be one of our gravel lots, and apparently there was it sounded like there was an agreement to do it, and there was some rough areas up there, so.
I'm not aware of any grading. We did have some drainage issues that we're working on right now.
Does it sound like the right area, 8 and 10?
I'll have to check.
Probably where they would park, horse trailers and that kind of stuff.
Are they requesting it to be graded? Or-
Yes, but it sounded to me like it was already discussed, and there was the event center people up there, but of course it would be our road graders, but.
And like I said, we've been doing work up there. They could have incorporated it into
Okay.
the drainage issue.
I can find out more as well.
On June 6th at 6 o'clock at night at Fremont Motors is the CNFR mixer. Everybody in the council's welcome to that. I'll get you the date that is council night when they recognize.
When is the thing here gonna be here? What
What's
are the
that?
dates?
Yeah, I
Dates
wish I
here?
could tell you exactly. Because I've got from their startup dates, they're already starting to arrive.
Is it the week of the 4th, Chris?
No.
You said it's at
11th
6?
or something like that.
When?
Yeah, 1800.
June 6th.
June
It's,
6th?
Yeah.
6 to 6.
well, June 6th is the mixer, but I believe it actually starts like 9 and goes. 10
It's on
through
666.
That's just a get together for you if you want to go.
Sure it is.
So
I think you called.
beat that topic up on your own.
It's on the 6th
And-
month of the 6th day at the 6th hour.
So
6
anyway,
p.m.
on June 12th, the work session, I may or may not be here because I'm going to the joint appropriations to discuss the, well, probably your favorite guy. I'm the gambling guy in the state, so. On the gaming commission issue.
Oh, there you go.
Thanks, Chris. Mike, you have anything?
I'm just curious if Dallas can now drive 50 miles an hour on Collins, or
This is America.
We would love for him
You
to.
could
Yeah.
make all the choices you want.
You're allowed to drive 30 though.
no, I didn't have anything. I shouldn't. I don't mean to be disrespectful.
You guys accomplished something today.
Yeah.
Bob?
Yeah, I'm not gonna be here on the 29th, so that's all I have.
Sean?
I'll be here at the June 5th meeting, and then I'm gone the rest of the month for training. Also, just kind of want to make a comment on the making the 5th cent tax permanent. It's a talking point to the opposition of the 1 cent is their fear of it becoming a permanent tax. So I think if they do that, they hadn't done a dangerous road, and any other optional tax that we want to see passed, is we're gonna have a tough time.
It's a fair argument.
So that's one of the opposition's talking points. But that's all I got.
Mr. Morgan?
I have a couple of things, but just on that note, it does benefit Cheyenne greatly, having that 6th penny. They get the other communities involved, everybody's on board, everybody gets their piece of the pie. But what benefits them the most is CNFR having all those tourists flock to Cheyenne, spending their money, all going towards those capital improvement projects. And once those are funded because it's a specific purpose, that 6 cent is just taken off immediately. So it does help, especially if you have a big event like CNFR or something that draws a lot of people into our town. It helps out a lot. I noticed Life Flight isn't on the back of our grid, and then also the sewer line meeting, trying to get the people that offer the warranty to our citizens here in town they would like to present to us on how that's going, how much money, and how many people are using it the second week of July. So I was just curious to know if we could maybe get thumbs to allow that on a work session for those people to give a presentation. For Life Flight, like I said, County Commission, they were more interested on what we would do, and then see if we could work together to try to make that happen.
Did everybody want to have that, support and have Life Flight?
Well, the life flight thing, you can just go buy that policy for $65 at the hospital.
They were going to come in and have the conversation with,
Yeah.
they did a presentation with the county, and then Jesse had proposed it at one of our meetings.
Yes,
So,
so they would, if we would get on board sponsoring it just similar to either the sewer line or prescription drug program, basically if the city would buy what it would take for all the residents to have it covered, it would be $2.50 per family. Now, if we said, no, we don't wanna go that route, we don't wanna buy that, but we'll help sponsor it, you can have the city logo, all that fun stuff, and we'll promote it at that point to insure your family for a year would be, I think it was $10 or
On
something
Life
like
Flight?
that, for Life Flight, $10.
and so John Perry was going to come in and do a presentation
Right.
for us. I don't know if anybody's interested.
I would be.
Yeah, I'm interested if it can be short,
Yeah.
indirect.
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
So if I would have paid the $65, do I get a refund of 62?
So the next item would be having the sewer line, people come in the second week of July, if that's okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I thought we took direction to get that on the agenda, and so we had it scheduled for the 26th.
Oh, we did?
The service line program, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's on the
Yeah,
26th.
that's what I was talking about.
Okay.
Did you speak to her already? Because I didn't think she was going to be in town until July, or at least our part of the region anyway.
We may be talking, we may be a little bit of a cross purpose here. We've been getting a request to elevate our presence with regard to that program, and we were hoping to get direction as to what council would like to do in concert with the opinion of your attorney as to where he thinks we ought to be with that. And so we might be talking about two different things, but I thought initially we were talking about the same thing. But we can put it whatever date you'd like. I know that they wanted the letter back in May, and of course we've been busy up until now. So 26th is what we have slated.
Is that not going to work, Jesse, the 26th?
I can reach out to her and I'll just copy the city managers on it.
So what I'm getting is there's some discussion we need to have where there might be legalities or something like that before we even decide to move on. Is that what you're saying?
That could be a problem.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And then I would think we'd probably hear that information separately, and then if we move forward, then we would have them come in.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Sure.
Good.
That makes sense.
Good clarification, thanks, Chris.
And just pretty sure we got that. So I guess the last thing is just going forward, when we're going to have new council members for next year's budget, I just would hope that we would talk about some of our growing pains and how we've gotten to this point and what we've done to correct that, maybe what to look out for. So hopefully just good handover notes whenever that does take place. You know, there's some big eye openers that are unfortunate that they're out there, but they're discovered now, and we do have a plan to take care of it. That's all I have.
Thanks, Jesse. Ellis?
With regard to life flight insurance, think of a family that is a working class family and some child gets killed in a car wreck and the highway patrol calls in life flight and they take them 51 miles into the airport or into our hospital, and then the family who was not only lost a child but lives on paychecks and gets a bill from Life Flight for $52,000 a mile, and they won't explain how they charge it. There's no explanation. You have to pay the money. They'll take, yes, if your insurance pays this $8,000, you owe the other $44,000. I've seen this, living through it. Have one Life Flight bill for $87,000, and they're relentless. And the state has been in a big lawsuit with them, and the state lost the lawsuit with them because the federal courts determined that you can't regulate anything involving aircraft. It's specifically a federal issue. So I don't know where this is all ending up with our workers' comp division, because they were paying $4,600 a life flight, and these people were charging like $110,000 because they life flighted some guy in from the well down to Denver Hospital or something like that. Many of the people that get life flighted die anyway. When I was on the hospital board, we had the life flight and we were losing $1 million a year on it. Now the hospital has contracted out with these outside carriers. They have an outside carrier now if you want medical records, and they send you a little disc with all the medical records, and there's 1,800 pages on the disc. You get a bill for a couple $1,000. Now, if the person himself, patient himself requests it, it's $6.50. It's protected under state law. So the idea of being protected on a life flight, because I'm guaranteeing you, none of you have insurance that will cover that. And you will probably have no choice in whether you ask an ambulance to come and get you or a life flight. So it is a big issue, and it's one that our people should be highly aware of. I'm happy, Mr. Manager, that you got a balanced budget. I think it's very good. It's the second year in a row. I think the city's financial issues are going in the right direction, and I think our staff is wonderful. I went out yesterday and went through the bail fill, and we just have great people working for us, and I got to see the bail fill and the work that's done out there and how hard people do work for our city, and I appreciate that.
You have anything else, Charlie? There? Good job. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Thanks, council, for working so hard the last couple of days. That's it.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good Memorial Weekend, guys.
Hey, Dallas, my insurance covered it.
Thank you for all your hard work on that.
Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Hey, Judge.
I lost patience with him. I like him. How are you?
Hey, I'll take a friendly bet with Dallas asphalt
Mr.
situation.
Fine about the discrepancy between what you're saying and what he's
That it won't
I
get
respect her as well. So,
I've been a once on that one.
my insurance covers
And usually they say that.
Right out of the middle.
I hate these.
And I think there's a lot I could have said about in response to all of that.
It's almost perfect.
And I was so silent about that.
Oh, you are?
We want to make them.
And that stuff, but yeah, okay, I'll bet you.
I think the guy.
Within
A year.
right, he was got it down to 6 months.
6 months.
That'll be
I'm good with that. You betcha.
Do
Do I get to work on it?
Well, and I like the guy. I just feel sick about what's happening.
I think you're on.